Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I am joined by Ken Napzok, co host of ForceCenter, to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Star Wars Episode 9 The Rise of Skywalker. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost conversations. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. Boy, do we have an excellent episode for you here. I think it's frankly one of the best that we've ever done in the 3 years of this podcast. And yes, we are celebrating a 3-year anniversary of this podcast as well on November 21st. So mark down your calendars if you really want to celebrate with us. I don't know what we'll be doing for that. Maybe just a post on all of our social channels, which we'll get into that in a second here. But yeah, 3 years. Holy cow, where's the time gone? But also, holy cow, where's the time gone in both 5 years of Star Wars on Disney Plus, as well as 5 years of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And of course, to talk about the film, break it down, talk about all the cool stuff that happens within the movie, and just talk about the era in which it came out, break it down, have fun, reflective conversation about it. I had to pull out, the big guns in a way, right? We had to go to one of my favorite podcasts, and just one of the great Star Wars punditries out there in the podcast realm right now and online, in just the Star Wars media space, and that is the Force Center podcast feed. So, of course, we reached out to our pal Ken Napzok to come on the show, and he graciously accepted the offer. So, he'll be on the other side of on our main segment of the show. We will have our conversation with him about the episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and looking retrospectively at the time which it came out, and the 5 years since, in celebration of its 5-year anniversary. So, Ken, like I said, part of the Force Center podcast feed. So make sure you go check them out for sure. They are wonderful in what they do and do excellent deep dive discussions, kind of similar to what we do here, but with a very, very, very well focused attention to detail, and that I really respect. And appreciate from them and everything that they do. I'm an avid listener. I'm a Patreon supporter for them. So make sure you go give Force Center all the love and support that you possibly can. Ken is also the author of the book Why We Love Star Wars, which is a fantastic book that he's written. I have a copy. I hope you get your copy as well somehow. And yeah, go support him on that. He's also a comedian. So he has upcoming comedy shows, probably at least an hour in the near future. And I've seen his show twice. He's fantastic on the live stage, and really appreciate his comedy work that he does. And he also has his own podcast feed. So just go to Ken Napzok, the Napzok Files on Spotify and Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And he is trying to grow out his YouTube channel a bit too. So he has what do you call the blathering, where basically it's live kind of call-in talk show, conversation with his channel members and Patreon supporters. But you could also join in the live chat for no cost, I guess, and just have a great time. I really enjoy the blathering a lot, and just really appreciate Ken's work and his time and graciousness in bringing this conversation to life here. Before we get into that conversation, I did want to run through the news in the Star Wars Lucasfilm Galaxy this week. And again, lighter news week. Skeleton Crew is just around the corner. We're about a little over 2 weeks away from its release, so really excited for that. The 2-episode premiere on Disney Plus. We're starting to line up our Skeleton Crew coverage, so just be on the lookout for those episodes in the near future for sure. But we did get a little bit of news in regards to the composer for the series. It'll be done by Mick Giacchino, the son of Michael Giacchino, who scored Rogue One and many other projects within the Disney family, of course. Mick has just gotten done with the score work for The Penguin, which is also another work in the universe that his father kind of helped steward with the Batman. So really excited to see what he does with this. and I can't wait. Skeleton Crew is just around the corner, December 3rd, folks. Um, so yeah, basically, one last thing I did want to note that Force Center, not Force Center, but yes, Force Center is there too, I think. But Force Ghost Conversations is now on Blue Sky and Threads. So if you want to just search for Force Ghost Conversations, if you're on those platforms and you want to follow along with us, um, we'd be very grateful. I don't know how much will be on X these days in the future, given recent events, but just want to make sure that you're all aware of where we're at in terms of our social media, so that you can follow along with us and all the cool stuff that we're doing and just engage in that conversation. So, Blue Sky and Thread, search for Force Ghost Conversations, and you'll find us in some capacity. So with that, folks, that is all the news that I had for this week's episode. At least this week's Cloud City Gossip. Of course, on the other side of this very short break, we'll be joined by Ken for our Rise of Skywalker anniversary conversation. Stay tuned, folks. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And, we talked about this in last week's episode where we were celebrating the 5-year anniversary of Disney Plus. But frankly, less than a month later, we had a full Star Wars movie. I mean, what a crazy time to be a Star Wars fan. Little did we know we were just getting into the weeds of things where 3 years later we'd have Willow and Bad Batch and Mandalorian season 3 overlapping. And we thought, wow, this is a crazy time. But November, December of 2019 was quite a time itself. So we're here actually to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And we have a very special guest here for you all to celebrate, to reflect, to remember this incredible film. We have a person who frankly needs no introduction. He's a comedian. He's the author of the book Why We Love Star Wars, a fantastic book. I hope you all have a copy. I certainly have one. And a co-host of the ForceCenter podcast feed. We have Ken Napzok. Ken, how are you doing? And welcome to Force Ghost Conversations.
Oh, my friend, I am very happy to be here. I appreciate you bringing me on for this one. And yeah, I do need an introduction. I've been around too long. I need to be reintroduced. So
Always happy to reintroduce you, and thank you so much for coming on and to talk about this movie that I think you and I are, might be at the forefront of celebrating this film and the themes of it. It doesn't seem to get the love and appreciation that I think that the other films of the Star Wars saga certainly do, and at least certainly of the sequel trilogy, perhaps.
mm,
It is maybe not loved to the degree that some love the others, and it might be hated by some. It's just maybe it just came
mm,
out of time. We'll get into all this stuff here with this
yeah.
film and the era that it came in. But I want to go back to the beginning of it all, and frankly, with the announcement of it, and the announcement of the title, frankly, as
Mm.
well, and the grandeur of the first trailer at Star Wars Celebration Chicago in 2019, which you were in attendance for. So when you first heard the title, The Rise of Skywalker, what were what thoughts went through your mind at that time, and frankly, retroactively, 5 years later now, what do you think of the title now? So let's do a before and an after on this one.
Well, I'll give you my exact thoughts the moment it was first revealed to me, and several thousand people in that arena in Chicago. I went, "Oh!" That was my thought.
That's great.
You're caught up in the moment. Ian McDermott was seconds away actually from coming out and saying, "Roll it again," and then he rolls it
Hmm.
again, and the vibe is there. You're excited. So I didn't have an immediate like, "Oh no, that's not bad," and I had that for other films.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I don't know where I was when I learned of Attack of the Clones, but at the time that was well, that sounds like a 50s sci-fi movie. Yeah, exactly.
And
That's
that's
what the
what you
movie
got.
is. Yeah. Phantom Menace is one of my. I love the title of Phantom Menace, but back then it was like, I don't know, shouldn't it
Hmm.
be like the first Jedi or something? Just dumb
Mm.
stuff. But later on, maybe that night, I had a little bit thought of the Rise of Skywalker was not clunky, but it was like it doesn't flow as easy as the
Hmm.
others. But
Sure.
Joseph Scrimshaw and I, my Force Center cohort, we were very excited about the third film having the R
Yeah,
Return,
yeah.
Revenge, Rise, and Joseph had talked about that on Force Center, so that was exciting. And then but the next day saw the trailer again on the convention floor, which is a near, I mean, it's absolute spiritual experience. I do love the title, and it makes sense. Of course, and we'll get to the retroactive part of the
Yeah.
question, but it makes sense. But it made sense then. It was an easy
Mm,
guess. That was kind of
sure.
the it's probably Ray being a Skywalker, right?
Right.
And I like that. I like that about it. That it's just like, nah, here's the story. We're getting
You
to
like
this.
that it wasn't necessarily a gotcha.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or like, like who is the last Jedi? Is it Jedi plural? Is it singular?
Oh, got it. Yeah, and I love the title Last Jedi, and I know it was taken from there was EU stuff as well, but like,
Yeah.
remember that discourse for a long time of just, well, is Jedi plural? Is this that? Like,
Oh, and then like the Brazilian translation in Portuguese, it means
yes,
one
yes,
Jedi.
yes, 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 and it's one thing I'll say, and I don't want to get too into the weeds on a sidebar, but it's like, and again, I give credit to Joseph Scrimshaw, like always saying, like since Force Awakens, Rebels before, but Force Awakens, all advertising in Star Wars has been pretty direct. They
Yeah.
don't do the gotchas. They don't do the tricks. The themes are present.
Mhm.
And I think looking back, that first trailer, and even JJ being asked about the question, understandably, was like, yeah, it will all make sense when you see the film. Just go see the film. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and I think it does. He wasn't
yeah.
lying. He wasn't misdirecting or I
Mhm.
gotcha. Like go to see the
Mhm.
theater and you'll be wowed. Like it's there. It's
Yeah.
apparent why it's titled The Rise of Skywalker, but it's
Yeah.
also multi-layered. So like
Mm.
like are you still in like are you still a fan of the title as time has
Absolutely.
gone on?
Absolutely.
Do you appreciate? Are you like Leo pointing at the
Yeah.
at the screen meme? You're like, there it is, the rise of Skywalker, or is it
Yeah.
you do pick up on the more metaphorical aspect of it every time you watch it now?
Yeah, no, definitely. Love it for its directness, love it for its pulpiness, love it for
Yeah.
what it's saying. It's not just about Ray and her journey and her choice to take the Skywalker name, affirming her as a Skywalker. Found family being important to Star Wars. I think it also has to do with a family that had fallen, a family
Hmm.
that, if this is the Skywalker saga, it not a lot of great wins, but a pretty bad track record for the family overall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some wins along the way, and
A
give
lot
give
of
a
defeats.
lot of defeats. Give Leia a lot more credit than the others for sure. But Luke even having to come back, and the whole I think an understandable, if I'm treating Luke as a real person, by the way,
Hmm.
in this
Hmm.
conversation, an understandable choice to run away, and it decides to come back. I think this film had a lot to do also with the rise of the Skywalker name again,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm
The
there for
glory
that
of
as
it
well.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like that. And I will say like also attribute to like technically Ray I guess kind of dies at the spoiler alert. She kind of dies at
Mhm.
the end of this
Mhm.
movie and it's
Yeah,
like Kylo Ren, the last Skywalker
yeah.
infuses the last of his life energy into
Mhm,
her so then she is reborn a Skywalker too, not just taking on the name but
mhm,
literally living on
mhm.
as a Skywalker with his force
Yeah,
energy, however you want to describe it. I feel like it's
yeah.
beautifully poetically done and executed in the movie, but there's just so much more layers to it that I think you've kind of hit upon
Totally.
here,
Yeah.
which I think is I like the title. I think it's really awesome,
Mhm.
and I like that it wasn't so like the discourse wasn't like focused on the movie rather than just the title. I think sometimes we get so lost in that.
Yeah, look, and you and I will get to the full conversation about the movie, which brings a lot of opinions.
Yeah,
I think the opinions of that film are so, you know, so much, and it's a robust selection of opinions, we'll say, that the title gets lost in all that, which is good. That we don't
yeah.
have to spend hours on the Attack of the Clones debate or anything like that.
So you were at Celebration Chicago
Mm.
for this endeavor, the announcement of it, the big episode 9, Stephen Colbert coming out and doing
Mm.
the whole shebang to
Right.
announce it, and the first trailer roll it again. We'll of course get into that a little bit here.
Mm.
To share my story, I was not at Chicago a bit, but just for you and for the listeners, I feel like this I've never shared this before outside of my cohort of my wife and I. We at the time we were living in Washington D.C. And we were actually dog sitting at
Mm.
a we were for extra money on the side. We would dog sit and we would stay in people's homes with the dog
Mm.
to be with the dog as long as we needed to. We were being paid for, etc. And the house that we were staying at, this family did not believe in televisions, so
Yep.
It's their choice, it's their house. We're merely guests in
Uh-huh.
this place. So I was like, "There's no way I'm missing out on Celebration. I have to see everything." They were live, of course, live streaming it, so I could watch it from the comfort of my home. I took off the day of I was supposed to be working. I was not going to be focusing on work, so I took off. And as many people know, in cities, it is difficult to find parking and affordable
Mhm.
parking at that too.
Mhm.
Especially when you know you're staying at a place for several days at a time and you don't technically live there, you may be paying an arm and a leg. So you have to
Mhm.
find out the ways in order to make your money go a little further.
Yeah.
So I knew of this apartment complex maybe 3 or 4 blocks away that if you hit lost ticket, they weren't tracking you. If you just hit lost ticket, you would pay like the price for one day. So I found the
Right.
loophole eventually in this
Nice.
parking lot. So I parked there, pulled the TV out of my apartment, and then hauled it 4 blocks just with this
Nice.
this TV to
Yeah,
in the busy streets of DC to get up to
that's
this
amazing.
apartment. And of course, they had a camera inside there, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, they brought their own TV. What are we doing as people?" I was like, "No, it's not you. It's us. It's us. I had to watch this. This was an important
Needed
religious
this.
experience. I needed to see
Yeah,
this."
that's amazing.
So yeah, and it rained. Not just rained, but it also snowed in Chicago too, I believe, for later in that celebration too. So
That
while
Sunday, yeah, that crazy snowstorm that came and actually kept a lot of us in for an extra day, which ended up being one of the best days I had at the con that
I'll
Monday.
tell
That
you,
was an
yeah,
extra day.
that Monday, that
Yeah,
episode one celebration panel
yeah,
too, like great stuff.
got to go to that. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the fortunate thing of having to spend an extra day in the Windy City. However, in
Mhm.
DC, it was warm that day, so while everyone was
Oh,
wondering, will we get in to see the Mando panel?
yeah,
I
yeah,
was saying, will they stream the Mando panel? Because I'm fine here
right.
in the nice, like, 75
That's
degree
right.
spring day that we had.
That's
Uh,
amazing. That's
Anywho,
right. Memories.
great title, great memories of this all. But let's get into the film itself here now that we've kind of
Mhm.
set a foundation for everything here. For your
Mhm.
first viewing of the movie, I don't know how or what the circumstances were of your first viewing of it, but what was the atmosphere like? And what were your biggest takeaways and perhaps initial reactions that you had as soon as the
Mhm.
credits start rolling and you're like, holy cow, I just saw a movie.
Yeah, yeah. I saw it at El Capitan Theater, which is the now
Oh,
Disney
love
owned
it.
historic
Love it.
theater
Yeah.
in LA, right there in Hollywood Boulevard, near Hollywood and Highland. And it was a press event or press screening, or at least a screening. Not everyone there was press, but
Hmm.
that and I say that because number one, it was still at the time, especially part of the job. My job at Collider would last only a couple weeks after, but it's part of the job. But it's a weird setting. So the best example I can give when I saw Rogue One on the Disney lot for a press screening,
Hmm.
sitting next to Jeremy Johns and um, red leader and gold leader show
Yeah.
up in the film, and he and I start clapping like yes, oh, no one else reacted, right? Like no one
Wow.
else,
We,
and
we
there's
would have
Star
been in
Wars
great
fans in
company
there.
because I
Yeah,
too was
yeah.
hooting and hollering.
I was like so cool, like no one else in the room, and that press could be a little. I don't know, little. I don't want to say stuck over it. It just they're there for a job, and
Yeah. It's
it's not a
different.
thing. So at least El Capitan's got a better atmosphere. Just going back to the premiere had happened and there were some other screenings. So some people I know had seen it. And even some of the people who I know who did not like Last Jedi or who did, but then eventually decided they didn't like Last Jedi, I think for
Yeah.
financial gain, different conversation, had said, I liked it. I liked it. So I'm always like, don't tell me, don't,
Hmm.
emotions are
Yeah.
spoilers. Like, don't tell me anything. And this one particular person was like, yeah, I liked it. I liked it, which I took as a good sign. But the anticipation was high. The energy was high, and thing I'll say about Star Wars, even if we're fortunate to have so many Star Wars stories out there in film and TV, books, whatever, and every once in a while, the one of them's not going to connect with you, right? Or you're not going
Yeah.
to like it as much. But the next time a new one comes along, I think if you're a Star Wars fan,
Hmm.
you're ready for the next one. You're ready for this. This next one could be the great story, the Star Wars
Yeah.
story. And maybe it doesn't work, whatever. But I think there was a lot of good energy in the screening I was at. It did slowly evaporate, but I didn't care. I was so into it. And you're not feeling it. And I'm trying not to tune into other people's energies. I
Sure.
was sitting next to my fiance Grace. Behind me was Joseph and his wife Sarah. And I always say I cried like 6 times in the film.
Yeah.
I was all in. We can break down some of the things that didn't work if we want later, but I was all in. The Han scene, the Han and Kylo scene got me.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
Chewie falling to his knees, that really got me. And I've always spoken honestly about the Richard E. Grant's General Pride turning to his admiral saying, what army is this, sir? Sir, it's no army. It's just people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that got me bad the first.
Mhm.
I was crying really hard at it, so I was emotionally involved. Um, then the film ends, and I'm on the second floor of the balcony, and Joseph puts his hand on my shoulder at one point because I think we're both emotionally moved, and that, and we leave, and I get to the lobby, and just a lot of people just had their walls up, man. And I'm not saying
Oh,
this like this to say that it was a perfect film and how dare you criticize it. No, no, no. I'm just saying
yeah.
I can tell you from being in that side of the business for a while, it just was like it was exhausting. We were in the
Mm.
lobby and people
Mm.
were what did Finn say? Well, oh my god, how insulting that! Oh my god, and I wanted Ray to be nobody. And it's just like, man,
Yeah.
but what was there? Talk about what was there.
Right, right.
And I was kind of snippy. I had tears in
Mm.
my eyes. And I just like, I don't wanna hear it. Like,
Yeah.
we'll do our shows, we'll do our podcasts, we'll do our video streams and everything, and we can debate about it, talk about it, all that stuff later. But in this moment, I was like, "No, man." I was moved. I was absolutely moved by that film. And, yeah, so that was my experience the first time seeing it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that, you were still able to take some agency over that, even with other people around you, you know, projecting their experiences and perhaps trying to project on other people what they
It's
wanted, and you're able to find, like, here's what's presented on the screen. I
yeah.
liked it and I was moved by it, and you can't take that away from me.
It's all valid. The criticism are valid, like I said, I'm not expecting everyone to love it, but I just one of the things about this modern day and age, I have a podcast I'm happy to have. I'm glad you have a podcast, and I'm glad everyone can digest art and talk about it and process it and have fun
Mhm.
with it and everything. But there's also this thing, especially 2019, it was the end of this particular run in digital media. I just did not want to hear anyone's opinions.
Yeah.
And until we get on a show or until we need to, or maybe I don't need to at all. So it was very nice. Me, Joseph Scrimshaw, Sarah Scrimshaw, Grace, and Mark Ellis. God bless Mark, who's just like, it's Star Wars. I love it. Like I'm in.
Yeah.
We snuck off. We didn't tell anyone where we were going because there's a lot of like, hey, you want to get lunch? You want to get drinks
Mhm.
afterwards? Yeah, F off, man. And we all just snuck across. We snuck across the street to a chain restaurant and just sat there
Oh,
quietly
beautiful.
because we didn't want to spoil it for anyone who might be interested and
Oh,
was
true.
hanging around. And we just quietly celebrated our joy for that film.
I love it. I mean, that's in a way just your victory over it all,
Yeah,
right?
a
You're
little bit.
celebrating in your own way. This is
A
your
little
own
bit.
victory celebration. You're heading
Uh,
over to, let's call it IHOP, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
celebrating with a bunch of pancakes and saying, "Let's have a great time."
That or a pizza kitchen that's located in the great state of California. Yeah,
California
yeah,
Pizza Kitchen. That's
yeah,
yeah, rocking
yeah,
and rolling.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, we had diametrically opposed experiences, I
yeah.
will say,
Okay.
for the first viewing, but the result was very similar, I will say,
Mm,
in terms of being moved by it emotionally. I went to a theater outside of DC in Alexandria, Virginia, where we lived at the time, or we didn't live there at the time, but it was just a theater that we enjoyed. It wasn't like super crowded at any time. So we were always
mm,
able to get a good seat and a good sound system at a dark room with comfy seats. And that's frankly all you need for a good theatrical experience
yeah.
and for many things these days. Took off work again because I'm like, I got to get that first viewing. If I don't get that first viewing that Thursday, I'm going to be an unhappy
Mhm,
camper for the rest of the weekend.
yeah.
And especially with these, like the December releases, where it's usually like the Thursday before the Christmas season really goes into full effect. A lot of people are traveling, so you really got to get that first viewing in, and then for at least for us, we're off to some other state to go spend the week with family, and then
Mm,
we'll maybe see it another time. But on that long ride, I need to listen to my podcast. I got to listen to my ForceCenter. I got to hear you guys what you
mm,
thought of it, and just think and reflect and all that stuff about it. So yeah, we got in there. We had I think a great experience watching the film. I will
mm.
say during the movie, it was probably some of the most vocal I've ever heard Star Wars fans in the middle of a movie,
Yeah,
particularly at the
yeah.
scene where Kylo Ren tells Rey, "You are a Palpatine." Someone yells in the back, "I knew it!"
Ah,
As if they had money
well,
on it.
that's
That
good.
perhaps,
That's
perhaps,
good. Yeah.
yeah, perhaps they had a bet of
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
sorts on this movie
Yeah.
on True Art. They had a
That's amazing.
hopefully they won $50 from their friend or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, people, but towards the end, people were hooting and hollering. When
Mhm.
it's just people. You see the full
Mhm.
armada amassed of people across the galaxy. I know every time we
Mhm.
get a new show or book, we're like, they're at Exegol.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
like, which I think is great. Just keep adding more to the merrier because it's a huge
Absolutely.
thing. So why not? Um,
Yeah.
which I think was awesome. And then afterwards, I think my wife went to the bathroom, and I was just kind of, every time I watch a Star Wars film, I just like, the first viewing especially, I just sit there afterwards. I find like a chair and I just like stare out
Mm.
into the ether, just like
Ah,
digesting it. I'm
love
like,
it.
what did I see? I have to compress, I have to decompress,
Yeah.
I have to think through every thought and emotion I have. But for this
Mhm.
one, I was very much like, my wife asked me, she's like, "What do you think of it?" And I said, "I really loved it. I really like this movie. There is a lot of, heart. Just saying there was heart of it
Mhm.
is diluting it to a form of art that
Mm.
it doesn't fully represent it, in my opinion. I think
Mhm.
it in the mold
Mhm.
of Return of the Jedi, which feels like a great victory over the Empire. This
Mhm.
had a true people's movement in a way that Return of the Jedi doesn't necessarily have. Perhaps because
Mm.
recording techniques and the visual elements of it and the scale and scope, right, of Return of the Jedi at the
Mhm.
time. I mean, that's frankly why Lucas goes back and tries to add
Mhm.
scenes
Yeah,
to it
to make it bigger.
to
Yeah.
make it feel bigger. But
Mhm.
this, without having to do that, felt like it was the galaxy against the final order, right? The
Yeah.
last stand of the emperor. This was
Mhm.
everybody, and I just felt entwined in this moment, especially maybe living in the DC area at the time and being influenced by all of that in the
Mhm.
era of 2019, just weeks
Mhm.
before COVID-19 was going
Yep.
into full effect.
Yep.
We were hearing rumblings at the
Hearing
time
rumblings.
of this.
Making
Um,
jokes. "Oh, what is it, a Corona beer? Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
man, we had no idea." Yep.
How
Yep.
unaware we were at the time of what
Mhm.
this would eventually become, and then how that
Mhm.
we say we were 5 years later, and it's frankly
Yep.
what that really means is we're coming up on the 5 year anniversary of COVID. That March
Mhm.
1st is really
Mm.
that big turnover of that
That's crazy.
crazy anniversary coming
That's
up in many
crazy.
ways.
Mm.
So I said I loved it. I felt I said two things. I said I loved it, and then number two, which I think it might be the take that I don't think I've heard anyone ever say about this movie. I was like, I really like what Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams presented in this movie. I was like, did it work 100%? Maybe not, and maybe not for everybody. But I like that they took some big swings in this
Mhm.
with and I think you and
Mhm.
Joseph have gone at length. I want to direct
Mm.
people to those episodes of Force Center
Mm.
about the connections between the Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker. But
Yeah.
I feel like in many ways he Chris and JJ
Mhm.
took that mantle and said, "All right, that's great. Let's take it even a step even further here. Let's expand upon this. Let's introduce the Force dyad." Which I'm like, that's great, tip of the iceberg. I don't know what it
Mm.
means now, 5 years later, but I'm
Yeah.
enthralled by it. I'm
Mm.
really intrigued by it. I want a book to explain it for me. Uh,
Yeah.
of course, the Emperor is back. The dead speak. Probably one of the most pulpy things I can think of, right? And it's right
Mm.
there in the
Mm.
title. It's such a callback to war.
Yeah.
Just this is what
War.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So just all those aspects of the film, plus just living in this moment of being like, all right, this is did it meet the expectation of trying to fulfill 1 through 9? Yes,
Mm.
I think so.
Mm.
Do I feel like there were aspects that called back to episodes 1, 2, and 3, films that I grew up with and absolutely adored? Absolutely. Did it have great callbacks to 4, 5, 6? Absolutely. Did it include elements that continued and felt like a cohesive story for 7, 8, 9? I think so as well.
Mm.
I think it was a really daunting task, giving a lot of the behind the scenes things, whether it
Mm.
be moving the release date, whether it be
Yep.
firing the director and having to rewrite a script from start to finish, probably writing the
Mm.
script while they were filming it. I think that's
Mhm. Mhm.
a very
Figuring
well
stuff
known
out.
story of this,
Mhm.
and trying things out as they're going along and figuring things out. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the core of the story feels. I don't like saying it feels like Star Wars because it means something to everybody and nothing to everybody else, right?
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
to me, I always believe that Star Wars is, as Lucas has been saying, it's like that the story for the 12-year-old that's always looking off to the horizon, that's about to be doing these great and wonderful things in life, and then it's seeing people enact these stories in a safe setting that they can learn light and darkness so that they can take those themes and lessons and then go out and be good people,
Mhm.
or the 12-year-old within all of us, so that we are you know being our best selves out in the world and all that. And I think
Mhm.
that this film presented many great themes that we can digest and work towards being better people about. A lot of that is confronting fear, and that's at the forefront of this movie, I
Mhm.
think.
Mm.
So that was my
Yeah.
big takeaway from all this. And of
You
course, I
got all
watched it
that
about
from
three
sitting in a
times.
chair?
Yeah, I did. I did. And then of course,
Mm.
we watched that, and I think we immediately went into the car and then drove 5 hours to Raleigh, North Carolina, where my wife's family is
Mm.
based. So I had all this just percolating in my head as we're
Nice.
driving. That I think we put on the John Williams
Mm.
soundtrack to just
Mhm.
also put us in that mood, and I just
Yeah.
started reflecting. So yes, that was a little
Mm.
bit was started in the chair, but then as ruminations went on
Yeah.
throughout the rest of that evening, and then as you get tired, your mind really starts to wander,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're like, I need to stay awake on this long car ride here. It's getting dark and it's almost midnight. I need to I need to
Mhm.
think through the themes of what Ray's story and journey arc actually meant.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we ended up on that evening there. So
That
that was a
does that
fun time.
absolutely, and I agree with, everything you're saying there about what it means and represents, and yeah, there's more to be discussed about, behind the scenes stuff, and behind the scenes stuff dominating the
Oh
experience for
yeah,
some, not everyone. The general audience probably has no idea who Colin
I'm sure.
Trevorrow was and that he was ever attached to the film. But there is a large collection of fans that, know that stuff, and it definitely affects the opinion. One of the things you're saying that I, have been s strong about, in the past is I think Chris Terrio understands Star Wars on a level,
I think so
that
too.
is, not, understood or respected, quite frankly. I think he's up there on just if listening to him talk about
I agree. I
what
could
is
listen
in
to
there.
him do interviews about
Yeah.
Star Wars all day long.
It's on a level with Ryan Johnson and
I
and
agree.
Filoni and George Lucas in terms of just understanding the core tenets of Star Wars. Did everything, come together perfectly, and was it a tough task? Yep, 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 yep. We can talk about that. Um, did I think they make some mistakes? Did I think even Chris made some mistakes in trying to explain it with the Rose
Yeah.
Tico stuff and her not getting
Yeah.
those things? Yeah, absolutely. But I think yeah, there's just our obsession with behind the scenes news reporting, of which I am a part of. I
Mhm.
was part of Collider Jedi
Mhm.
Council, a show that fostered and grew a lot of that obsession with talking about every little tiny tidbit.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
retrospectively looking back, it destroyed a little bit of the discourse around film and just the ability to enjoy films and shows as they come. A lot of people showed up to that movie going, "Well, this ain't gonna work,"
Yeah.
and they left with that feeling too, because I don't think they sat and just engaged with the film.
Agree. I agree. They were like, it's too
Mhm.
much like The Last Jedi, or it's not enough like The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
I heard that discourse a
yeah,
lot. And then, of course, now it's
hmm
available for people if you want.
hmm
The episode 9 Colin Trevorrow script, Duel of the Fates, as it would have been called then. That
hmm
is available for people. I've never checked it out. I have no interest personally in
yeah.
reviewing it. Like, hey,
It's
it's there
got a
if you
couple
want it.
things. Yeah, it got a couple things. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Battle of Coruscant was one that I was like, oh yeah, yeah, definitely would love that. Yeah, but to quote Mark Hamill about his original opinion on Last Jedi and Ryan Johnson, I fundamentally disagree
Yeah.
with Colin Trevorrow on his view of how to find balance in the Force. I just think it was philosophically not aligned with Star Wars and what
Yeah.
George has always put in there. So yeah, yeah,
Agreed. Agreed. And to add one more thing on the Chris Terrio of it all, I in preparation for this, I rewatched the Skywalker Legacy, the documentary
it's a
of the
great doc.
making
It's
of
a
Episode 9, which is
great doc.
fantastic. It's also up there with the director and the Jedi.
hmm
It's
hmm
really well done, folks. Go check it out. You've got the 4K or Blu-ray. It's on there. If you're on Disney Plus, it's also available on there too. Thankfully,
hmm
uh,
hmm
Chris Terrio just sitting around his library of Star Wars books and mythology books,
Right,
just chatting
right.
about stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
where's Chris Cam? I just need him full 2 hours just spatting off
Yeah.
ideas about things. I'm like, come on, where's that? Where's that story?
Yeah.
I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mm.
So I want to talk about a little bit some of the expectations or anticipation for this film here. And this film is and they talk about this a lot in that documentary. Like, this is the final chapter of the sequel trilogy, but it's also the final part of 9 films.
Mhm.
All 9 parts of the Skywalker saga to this point. We'll see if things happen later. Who knows? So do you think that perhaps the Rise of Skywalker, whether fairly or unfairly, had some of the largest expectations or anticipations ever for a film, and why do you think so?
I mean, because it's the weight of Star Wars, and Star Wars can sometimes feel like it's gonna crumble on its own under its own weight.
Yeah.
I would say that, Episode 7 is the expectations for that film didn't just begin when the sale was announced in 2012 or when the
Mhm.
movie was announced or the title was announced. That expectations for that film began in May of 1983.
Yeah.
And maybe even before that, if you believed it was going to go on. Um, every kid dreamed about an episode 7 in their own heads.
Mhm.
I had one
Who
written.
didn't?
I,
Yeah.
I was going to play Han and Leia's kid, so I guess Adam Driver did all right. But that was my dream in '84 and '85 and everything. So that carries on to 9, especially with the. And I get why they did it. I don't disagree with it, but calling it the Skywalker Saga and the
Mhm.
conclusion of the Skywalker Saga, it's a great sales pitch,
Yeah.
but it also creates some expectations. It also creates, quite frankly, a built-in lie
Mm.
because
Sure.
anytime Luke shows up, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, well, the Skywalker saga is continuing.
That's right.
But I do think it draws it too close. And then of course now we gotta hopefully I'm very hopeful we'll get this next Rey movie offline. And now
Mhm.
even as
Yeah.
you and I are recording this week, there's articles I haven't even really checked out yet about Rey central to
Yeah,
several
I've not
films in Star Wars,
either.
and I hope she is because Rey's one of my favorite characters. But then you're always gonna have that snarky debate. Well, I guess the Skywalker saga continues. So it's like I wish they didn't do that in a way, but it made a lot
Right.
of sense, but it did create a lot of expectations, and you got 8 films. I always argue Rogue One and Solo are part of the Skywalker
We're
saga
in the same
because
boat there.
they affect they affect the galaxy.
They are
Um,
integral. Yeah.
but even just going off the 8 main films there, yeah, you got to bring it home, man. And
Mhm.
I think one big miss for me was in episode 9, but also maybe in episode 8 too. It's like just a complete absence of Padme.
Yeah.
Not
Oh.
even a reference to Padme. I love what they did with the character hanging over the story of the Kenobi series.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
couldn't necessarily say her name till I got that. Maybe some canon they didn't want to rub up against in a show that was challenging for some folks in terms of canon. Not for me, but yeah. So I think 9 just naturally you're bringing home. And again, I had a friend. I still have him. He's one of my best friends, Matt Key. But he had a podcast. Is what I was
Yeah.
trying to say. Some of you might remember Matt Key from the Marvel Movie News days on
Oh, I
Popcorn
do.
Talk and
Yep.
everything. Deeply philosophical guy, and he had a podcast about philosophy and everything, and we just come on and talk about things. And
Oh,
I wanted
awesome.
to talk about fandom overall, and their weird obsession with endings and
Mm.
how all of them seem to be perceived as bad. And I'm saying that in a general sense.
But you're not
Um,
wrong in the general
yeah,
feeling, though.
general feeling. And look, this was 2019 was a rough year for me as a fan because you had Rise of Skywalker and it gets beat up for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons,
Yeah.
but some of it being it's the final one, and
Sure.
that didn't land.
Yeah.
And then I am the biggest Game of Thrones fan,
Yep.
and season 8, a season I love as well,
Mhm.
though not perfect. A season I absolutely love, ranked very high. I think they brought it home and interesting, intriguing, in wonderful ways and important ways.
Yeah.
I don't know, the thought of a kingdom not wanting to be ruled by a woman and rather seeing it burn to the ground, like and
It hits
her
home
and her
recently.
her snapping and for many reasons. And anyways, that was running through my head. Anyways, not to get too far down it. So Matt and I try to figure out. I just think
Yeah.
there's a Sopranos, the Seinfeld finale. Everything.
Hmm.
Go through all the great finales. There are good ones, and there are some that make people happy. I like the Kirby Enthusiasm one, which was a
That was
play
good.
on
That
the
was a really good
Seinfeld
one.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. it just we psychologically don't wanna let go, I think.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and and I'm
Yeah.
not a smart enough man to really fully understand it, but I think Rise of Skywalker was up against that too.
Mm.
Even if it was Trevorrow, even if we never, changed directors and Palpatine didn't come back, which threw a lot of people for a loop, blah, blah, I still think there would have been this, "Well, they didn't take it home,"
Yeah.
because it's just we don't wanna let go.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, we don't, but I think that's the greatest lesson is learning to let go. Perhaps one of Star Wars' biggest things is learning to let go and move forward, and I think
Yeah,
this film presents that in a way
yeah.
metaphorically by putting the lightsabers into the ground as the grave and then looking towards the twin suns and starting over again.
And the greatest villain of all time in that saga, being an example of never letting go, and
Clawing
versus,
back, yeah.
yeah, versus, Luke Skywalker saying it's time to let go.
Peace and purpose,
Leia
yeah.
holding on to save, until her son is saved and letting go, like, and you got,
Yeah.
Sheev Palpatine is the ultimate example of you will cling to every second of life to get more power, to destroy,
Yeah.
to dominate, to not pass anything on, it's there, it's present.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And we're going to get into the sheave of it all in just a bit here.
Yes.
But you also, yeah, 2019 was the end of eras in many ways.
Mm,
I don't know if it definitely wasn't planned that way, but
mm,
with, you mentioned Game of Thrones, Star Wars,
mhm.
also Avengers Endgame was the end of an era too.
Right.
This was just a year of, we're going to close these chapters and see, how we quote unquote stick these landings. And that was so much of as you're saying, the discourse was,
Yeah.
well, how's this episode doing? How's this show doing? How's this movie going to close it out? I don't know.
Mm,
Um, and I think it makes sense that you would want to close out, like, it thematically. It fits the
mm,
one, two, beginning, middle, and end structure,
yeah.
um, and all that. And it's tough when you're saying, all right, this has to be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're kind of in a way boxing the creative to some degree by saying, all right,
Mhm,
this is it. But given that directive, I think, like what we've already talked about here, as much as they could, I think they stuck this landing and hit at those great beats that we will still cling to,
mhm,
um, as time goes on, which I think is awesome. So this film, I think, continues to be a gift that keeps giving, and I
mm,
hope that people, as time goes on, will revisit it with perhaps different eyes, and maybe the expectation that they had coming into it will cool
mhm,
it down. Right? I've already mentioned, like, to some people it was too much like the Last Jedi, and to some people it
mhm,
was not enough like the Last Jedi, and they
mhm,
boo-hoo this film because of that. And again, what you've already said
mhm.
is, well, that's fine, but you brought that in with you. You
Yeah.
took that with you into the movie theater, so you already made an opinion about this film in some way, shape, or form before you even saw a single image of it presented to you in context.
Mhm,
So that's, it's ForceCenter gratefully says, speculate responsibly, have fun dissecting trailers and thinking through things. But as soon as that,
yeah.
the Lucasfilm logo pops up, turn your brain, take all that out and see what happens,
Yeah.
and then react and respond to it and reflect on it and process it and think through it, and maybe you'll have a
Mhm,
different meaning for it now than you did back
mhm.
then.
Yeah, yeah, no, that speculate responsibly thing we said came out of Last Jedi, where we obviously had a lot of speculation. Obviously, we had a lot of
Yeah.
things we thought were gonna happen in Episode 8 and wanted to happen. Some of it did, some of it did not, some of it really did not, and, a key lesson I learned was taking I took about 5 days after
Yeah.
seeing it
Yeah.
and determined what I really like about it. Saw it several times in the theater and was able to connect with what is there. And that's my big
Mhm.
thing. Then something that Joseph has brought to what we do in Force Center and has been present for Jennifer and I and him for years is engage with the art that is presented to you. And you're talking about Rise of Skywalker. Maybe one day we're celebrating 5 years. Recently there was some, I'll call them jokes going, some bittersweet gallows humor of jokes of, well, maybe we shouldn't have made fun of somehow Palpatine returned.
Maybe we were too hard on this, yes.
Maybe too hard on that. And I would say, yeah, you were hard on it 5 years ago because the same message was there.
It
Because
was.
it was clear. But when you're talking about people reevaluating, I think sometimes it's fair to say, hey, a movie can be bad for a lot of reasons, but art is always appreciated
Yeah.
by someone, right? And I do agree with that. Even the worst movie that you think you've ever seen, someone's like, yeah,
Someone's
love
starting a
that.
podcast on it. Yep.
Yep. Someone's getting a tattoo on it, like everything. So that aside, putting that aside, I just when we reevaluate things, I think a lot of what I want to have happen, and the prequels are a great example of that, is to engage with what is there,
Yeah. Yeah.
what is there, and so many of the critiques I heard of Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, and sometimes those two parties warring with each other or agreeing with each other, like you said, um, every time it's not like, well, the actors weren't, the tone was off, like I have a criticism some in Last Jedi, that a film I love and nearly lost my digital media career defending. uh I think Rose Tico, I think Kelly Marie Tran is great. She's kind of in a different movie than Finn's kind of, it's tonally up and down sometimes, and that can be a directing issue, that can be a writing issue, could be a lot of things. We can have those conversations all day. I think some of that's present in Rise of Skywalker. I think they were dealt a bad, tragic card with Carrie Fisher
Hmm.
passing. This would have been a lot more of her film, and she would have
Absolutely. Yeah.
been alive to do it. And they made the best to, I was one of the people that was like, I think Meryl Streep or Annette Bening could play the
I
role.
think so. Yeah.
And maybe that's what we need to do for the character. But they did what they did, and I like what they did. But anyways, all I'm saying is I want people to go back and the critiques I was hearing. So I'm wandering here a little bit. This is why I host a show called The Blathering. Um, it was too much of like, well, they should have,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, they didn't. So tell me what you think about what is there.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
often, I don't get those answers when I'm talking at parties or bars or on
Mm.
podcasts. You still might not like what is there. Totally fair. But I want you to discuss what's there, connect with what is there. Well, the prequels, the dialogue is a little, yeah. Dialogue's wasn't, the acting is stifled because that's what George wanted.
Yep. Nothing new.
Got it. Heard that. But what is there?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is there in that scene? And that's how movies get reevaluated, I think. In many ways. Some other ways it's generational. The prequels also has to do with,
Sure.
you know,
Hey,
my
I'm here.
generation
Yeah.
wanted to stamp out the flame. My buddy Adam Witt, I quote him all the time. Check out the Movie Guys podcast with Adam and Paul Preston. Adam Witt tells me he says all the time, and has told me all the time. He goes, "Our generation, we're both Gen X."
Hmm.
And he goes, "Our generation, the first chance we had, we tried to destroy Star Wars to the next generation."
Yeah.
That's powerful. When he said that, I
It
was like,
is.
"That's exactly what we did."
It's a painfully true statement.
Yeah. So a lot of the reevaluation is going back to and going, what did this mean for people, then who weren't me?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I mean, look, I was one of those kids too. And
Mhm.
yeah, I was 4. The Phantom Menace came out. The Revenge
Mm.
of the Sith was, by all intents and purposes, my Star Wars film. I've seen Attack of the Clones in the
Yeah.
summer of '03 300 times. And
Woo!
and that's not hyperbole.
Yeah.
It happened.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but it happened.
Good for you.
It was a great time. It was a great time.
Mhm, mhm.
But like it is that kind of thing of like we love it so much that we try to take sometimes we're so critical of it and
Yeah.
try to take it away from others rather than having to like enjoying the big buffet that exists
Mhm.
of all of this. You may not like everything of it, or you may say like, I don't want pizza today. I want chicken
Yeah.
wings. And
Yeah.
great, go on over there. The Golden Corral's got a whole lot to offer here.
Star Wars is a golden corral. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and it's great that eventually, hopefully, through like this, great conversations where we analyze, talk through, discuss the aspects of the film and the context of when it came out and all that stuff, that it does have a renaissance similar to the prequels. Like I remember
Mm.
telling people, ForceCenter has greatly done a wonderful job, at least, at least in like 2015, 16, 17, with
Mm.
the concept of being a prequelist and being like open
Mm.
and
Yeah,
honest
yeah.
about it and saying like, this is great. Whereas in like '06, I was like, I'm a sagaist. I like
Yeah.
the Star Wars saga. It was a
Yeah.
great way to tell people that I like Star Wars, and I like
Mhm.
the subtly tell them I like 1, 2, and 3 without
Yeah.
like getting yelled at by usually older men
Yeah.
for liking
Yeah.
other things other than 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. That's exactly
Which
what it is.
and hopefully that there's this new
Yeah.
wave of kids that are if you're 10 when this movie
Mhm.
comes out, you're 15 now. You're almost
Yeah.
driving. So like
Yep.
you probably have social media at this point. You can contribute
Mhm.
to the conversation. You can make a
Yeah.
TikTok about how much this film means to you. And maybe in 10 years when you're 20, and who knows, hopefully we have another Star Wars film, they're making references back to this movie,
Yeah.
and you're able to say, "Who that there was that was in Rise of Skywalker. It's Claude. It's Claude. He's
Yeah.
here."
It's Claude. Claude is here.
That
Agree
wouldn't
with
that be
you.
the gift that keeps on giving if Claude
It would be. More Claude,
appears
please.
at something. And speaking of Claude and the joy that it brings,
Mhm.
from listening to the Force Center recently, I believe that you've said that you're really often to watch the Rise of Skywalker when you're just like trying to put on
Mhm.
a Star Wars film in the background, or you just need to kill
Yeah.
an hour or two here, or you're eating lunch, you'll put something on. Oftentimes, you said you'll put the Rise of Skywalker on,
Mhm.
and I was wondering just like what about the film draws you to
Yeah.
return so often?
It is just wonderfully Star Wars, and you're right. What is Star Wars changes from person to person, and you have to
Yeah,
be aware of that. So I'm speaking in generalities here. It is, along with Solo, a Star Wars story. The films that when I'm just in that, you got to realize too, Anthony, like Star Wars is part of my job. I
yeah,
pay part of my bills by analyzing, talking about it, and
hmm
and there's times I was recently at a party and someone tried to pull me into a Star Wars conversation, and I was like, I'm off duty.
I hear you.
Like, I don't wanna talk about it, right? So it sometimes affects me where I'd rather watch a sports documentary or music
hmm
documentary or just play Fortnite and then watch Star Wars, but when
Sure.
I'm feeling it, those 2 films come up a lot in my queue to watch because they have the energy, the zip, the zap, the pulp, the
hmm
poignancy, um, they tug on my heartstrings. They make me think, and I'm such a fan of the film Solo, and I'm a fan of the film Rise of Skywalker. And what I love about it, it is built on the true serial nature of Star Wars, the
Yeah,
Saturday morning serials, the adventure. Each scene ends with a cliffhanger almost. It
sure
moves along,
does.
and the film does move so fast for me, and it's a longer film like a lot of films these days. And I remember when they announced the runtime, I was like, more, like Kylo, like, give me another hour. Like, we got to end this thing
Yeah.
the best way possible. From the opening scene on Above Mustafar,
hmm
which is finding Palpatine, like that. That's a horror short,
It is.
you know. My boy, I've died
I
before. It's one of
made
my
you.
yeah, one of my favorite Star Wars scenes. Love that scene.
So
And then
good.
it immediately goes into the light skipping scene, the light
Oh
speed skipping scene, and
gosh.
win the war, and all
Yeah.
with Bulio, and it just and it's just so it's one type of thing where I'm just like, it's on, and Star Wars is there,
hmm hmm
and it reminds me of my time with New Hope and Return of the Jedi and Empire, particularly like Return of the Jedi is a good example. It is Star Warsy. It's so
Yeah.
Star Warsy.
Yeah.
Empire's the best, but you know what I mean?
Hey.
Like, hell, you want to get into debate? Raiders of the Lost Ark's the best indie film, but Last Crusade's the one I watch more.
Sure.
And so that Rise has got that vibe to me. When they're
hmm
on Pasana, and then there's a chase, and then there's this, and then going to Kajibi, and they have the moments where it calms down. But then you got one of my favorite lightsaber fights is the Rey and Kylo Star Cruiser to
Mm.
Jimmy fight. Oh
So
my
good.
god, I love that. And then it builds and builds, and that's why I put it on all the time. And then it has great meaning for me. It has
Yeah.
it's poignant, and so sometimes I just want to feel that too. It's the film that makes me feel the most hopeful
Mm.
in
Mm.
Star Wars.
I like that. I too have a similar, I often find myself putting this on, and I think it's because what you alluded to is the pacing of this film is just spectacular. It
Yes.
does have that Kajimi sequence where it does kind of slow
Mhm.
down a little bit, but it has to because that's C-3PO's kind of goodbye to the team.
Oh
It
man,
has to have gravitas, so it's a big moment. You can't just
I
zip through
mean,
that.
you want to talk about one of the reasons to love this film is it is one of the only films that gives 3PO his due.
Yeah, it does.
And saying that, that's not as a criticism to the other films. That is just like 3PO's a punching bag.
He gets to
We
shine.
got 8 films of everyone
Yeah.
kind of yelling at him,
Yeah.
kicking him, punching him. Only the Ewoks
Oh,
cared about him.
geez.
And
Yeah, he becomes a
and
god, yeah.
and I'm sorry, but that the moment that Ray says, the odds better than any of us.
Mhm. He doesn't even say what the odds are, he just knows. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't bother it's not worth to
yeah.
tell them.
And it's a wink and a nod of a line for sure. Because we think of 3PO and we think of the odds are blah blah blah. Never tell me the odds. Got it. Love that scene too. But when Ray delivers that, it
Mhm.
is played with such sincerity because it's
Yeah.
her. It's someone who cares about those around her. That's what we know about her from the moment she meets BB-8. That's her save the cat moment, if you want to look at it in terms of a
Sure.
screenwriting book. But that carries on throughout her. She just wants nothing more than just wants to help those around her. But she's in a film where she has to rely on others, and she's afraid of who she is and her own power will
Mhm.
destroy people. That moment where she tells 3PO, like, no one knows the odds better than you, like, and you still have to do this. Like, it's such a good moment, and it's 3PO at his best. That is the best C-3PO film,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
another reason to love it. Another reason to have it on because I'll be cooking something. I'll be like, oh, I've got to hear his joke. Is this the afterlife or droids allowed here? Whatever the joke. Like, got it, love it.
Is
Want
it?
to hear it. Want to hear it. Want to hear it.
Oh my
You know.
gosh. Yeah, they
You
have that
know.
moment where they're like staring, like they're what's the context? Like 3PO, they just look at 3PO and he looks off in the distance and he's like, "What?"
Yeah, yeah.
The great comedic timing. Come on, Tony Daniels is just
Yeah,
knocking it out of the park in this
it's just
movie.
some of his best.
Ah,
He's some of his best.
so I would say, like, especially like with that, like, you start this movie and then you're hooked in because of how fast it's moving. Like it's like the
Yeah,
definition of faster, more intense. You are just
yeah,
you're here, you're there, you're there, you're there, you're here
yeah.
next, and you're like, well, I might as well finish the movie at this point. I'm in it.
Yeah, same with Solo too, but yes,
Same
same
deal,
same vibe,
exactly. Solo is
same
the
vibe.
same pacing vibe. Whoever was
Mhm.
editing these movies, kudos to you guys, because
Yeah,
I don't think you don't get enough credit.
mhm.
I don't think.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I also find myself putting this on a lot. I think it does have that hopefulness. I think that you were saying. Like, again, I tear up every time too when it's like it's just us, it's people.
mhm,
Lando said we had each other, and just to see
yeah,
the team back together, and what's left of the team. Frankly, we've gone on this journey with them, and
yeah,
and to feel the weight of the sacrifices made along the way. This movie really does, I think, a good job in presenting and feeling that weight.
yeah.
When you see the whole armada of people in Battle of Mexico. I'm like, yeah, I wish I could be one of them. How
There-
can I
there-
be that in the real world? Like, how can I be a force for good?
we need it. I think everyone's forming up on Blue Sky. Yeah,
I joined today.
yeah. There's more of us, Poe. There's more of us, Poe is one of my favorite moments. It's a tear moment. If
Yeah.
you're tracking them, it's in conjunction with the. It's just people, but there. I understand, and it's not wrong to have that feeling of just with any Star Wars past 1983 that it
Mhm.
ended. The Ewoks danced, fireworks. It's over. It's over. And yeah, to continue in any way, you're gonna stamp on that ending a
You're gonna
little bit,
ruffle some
right?
feathers. Yeah,
This is
exactly.
famously J.R.R. Tolkien had tried. He had some stuff about going forward past Return of the King,
Yeah,
and struggled and found to do that you'd have to it'd almost be too real.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
you'd
Let's go
have
write the Silmarillion instead.
yeah, yeah. Somehow Morgoth has returned. Somehow Sauron has returned, and
Again.
and he yeah again and again and again, and Love Rings of Power right now too.
Me too.
Yeah, but going to what you're talking about too, and I don't know this is where you wanted to go, but it popped in my head of one of the reasons I just love it so much. Like, so I get 1983, I get Return of the Jedi, the Ewok stance, the party was over, Palpatine fell, got it,
Yeah.
totally got it. He died. I accept that he died in a literal scientific sense.
I mean, he says he did too.
Says he did. He says he did.
He did.
But
Yep.
that was a military victory. It was a galactic civil war.
Yeah.
It was a military victory, and a government was overthrown, and a new government formed in its place. Problems and all, we see now in the Mandoverse era that it's not perfect. I look at Rise of Skywalker as a complete victory. It's
I
Leia's
agree.
complete victory.
Yes.
Once again, the Princess of Alderaan thinks she can bleep me up. Because Palpatine always had a thorn in his side, and that name
Yep.
was Padme. And this is the daughter of Padme, the Princess of Alderaan, who's there to trip him up. And it's Leia's final complete victory. That unfortunately,
is.
sadly, tragically, the character's not there for because she had to pass on. And I think that moment of it's just people. You had a galaxy ready to rise and fight. And yes, we need heroes like Luke to inspire. But practically, it's easy to be inspired, harder to actually execute the inspiration.
Yeah.
And I think this film had a lot about that. And I think
Right.
it was Lando going out. And I'd love to see deleted scenes of Lando just knocking on space doors,
Oh
canvassing
boy.
for Leia. but the point is, there's more of us, Poe. There's more of us. People will people will rise, and people will gather, and communities
Hmm.
will form. Bonds will be forged and not broken. And it's mythical fable, BS in a way, but it's real.
It
It's
is.
real, and we see now more than ever. We're in for many people. I don't want to assume all your listeners, but many people are in a political fight for the lives of maybe not you, but others affected
Hey,
by
no, yeah.
policies and legislation that might be put into place. I have friends who are afraid to step out the front door right now. So we've got to come together. And it
Hmm.
can't necessarily be a military, and it can't. And this is a film that the violence and the action is literal, but sometimes it's spiritual, and sometimes it's
Hmm.
in other ways. And I think this represents it. And it represented it to me in 2019,
Hmm.
because even then we were looking at an
We
election
were,
soon.
yeah, in a similar boat.
Yeah. And this is what was always at the center of what George was talking about. This is how democracy dies. This is how people do it, and this is also how it can end. Community,
Hmm.
symbiotic relationships.
Oh,
Just today, I was posting about one of my favorite scenes is you said people going to die scene with Jar Jar and Padme,
hmm.
which is about
We
two
so ready to
people
do our
realize
part.
we are ready to do our part. Gungans are proud. That is a native son of a planet that was overtaken by these interlopers that Padme is a queen of, and they both realize we're in this together. It's our
Oh, yeah.
collective fight,
Yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
stronger here together. And she humbles herself before the leader of these natives and indigenous people to this land that her ancestors had trampled over. If you read the story of Star Wars, the history of Star Wars, and that's all through Star Wars all the time. It is Leia
Hmm.
sitting and looking at a furry little creature that everyone overlooked. Everyone wanted to stamp with their feet, and says, "I will treat you as an equal,
Respectfully. Yeah.
respectfully." And then we're in this together now, and they rise up and fight. It's all through Star Wars, and I think it all comes to a head in Rise of Skywalker.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Look. I'm the student here. I'm listening to Professor Napzok. Give us a great lesson here in Star Wars. This is perfect. I love
I,
this.
I just look, man. Star Wars is silly. Star Wars is over the top. Star Wars is dumb at times, right? Like, I come on, man. I love that. And I used to get on my bike and pretend I was this speeder bike biker scout. I used to, lightsaber fight with my flashlight at work or hold it like a like.
Yeah.
Star Wars is silly, and it got me right. I was one of the people pulled in for me in 1983. Um, and that's there, but Star Wars, if you grow with Star Wars is right waiting for you, and there's all this stuff is all the way through it, and it's powerful stuff. A lot of people over the last week sharing the opening prologue from the New Hope novelization released before the film came
Yeah.
out. So before Star Wars hit theaters, it its novel begins with the most direct political of statements, and I think it's worth a read too for people. Check
Certainly.
it out. So I love it. All that stuff is there for you, and it's inspiring if you want it to be.
And you get the best of you have that, and
Yeah,
then in the wacky Return of the Jedi novelization where Uncle Ben
Uncle
is,
Ben,
is
Uncle Ben,
Uncle
and
Owen
Uncle Owen is his
yep,
brother. Yeah,
yep. So
yeah, all that
Star
stuff,
Wars has
and
it all.
Star Wars has it all, and it's got a gaping maw in the sand dunes that burps when it eats a bounty hunter. It's got an Eopie farting in Jar Jar's face. It's got Jar Jar and Jar Jar being the theme of Everyone Matters. Like, it's all there. But I'm just saying, I appreciate your kind words about me and Joseph and Jennifer, what we do in ForceCenter. But I always say we're just pointing at the screen and going,
You are,
it's right
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, and that, from a fan, I love it. So thank you.
Well, thanks for listening.
So back to the Palpatine of it all. We've kind of
Mm-hmm.
teased a little bit here, but I want to dive into that a bit. Perhaps it
Mm-hmm.
was the biggest reveal from that trailer at Celebration Chicago, right? The famous
Mm-hmm.
"Roll It Again."
Mm-hmm.
What was the energy like in the convention once that news dropped? And then how did you feel about his return?
So,
Both when you saw the
yeah.
movie, kind of when you before you saw the movie, when you saw the movie, and then in this time frame
Mm.
afterwards, like where have your thoughts
Mm.
evolved on the dead speak, the Fortnite of it all?
Yeah, I mean,
All of
yeah,
that goes into this.
crazy time. Yeah, I have to remember, because that's an era where a lot of what I said is permanently on the internet.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
Fortunately or unfortunately. So I was dubious. There had been rumors. I'll just say it. There was some inside intel around the office that this might
Okay.
happen.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'll just say that. And I liked the idea, but my expectation was, oh, but it's like a Sith, not a the Sith can't be Force ghosts, but they can haunt maybe. And Joseph had this great idea, but maybe he's haunting the Death Star. Maybe there's something they're chasing,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
racing to get him and get control of it. Like I wanted more of that. I think I even said on Jedi Council, like, God, I don't want like a clone Palpatine to pop out and be like, hey, na 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 na,
Which is kind of what you got.
and kind of what you got. But the expectation built, but again, no confirmation. I didn't sit down in that convention hall thinking, well, this is it. They're revealing Palpatine.
Yeah.
Again, rumors were strong. That's all I can say. But there have been other rumors too,
Sure.
as
Just
well, that
rumors
didn't come true. Yeah,
until it's confirmed.
but
It's just a
but
rumor.
this is information that's coming from pretty good inside source, we'll say. But
Okay. Right.
then you hear the laugh. It's the teaser trailer, so you see the Death Star. You see the Death Star on was it Kif Bear? And then you hear that, and we're like, oh, and it was like all that I don't want to see the clone. All that went out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All went out. Like, oh, they're doing it. They're doing it. And ever generally speaking, everyone was excited in that. 19,000 people, whatever the hell the number was. I don't know. I didn't survey everyone, but everyone's excited. When Ian McDiarmid comes out, look, man, I've been to some rock concerts. I've seen Lady Gaga. I've seen the Rolling Stones, man. Come on. I've been around, I've seen those moments where people come out. I've been at Star Wars conventions where George Lucas comes out. Ian McDiarmid coming out, and the arena kind of goes red, the hue of red, and everyone realizes it because he's there, and then he comes on camera, and then that roll it again. I have never been in the presence of a bigger rock star. It was just such an amazing moment.
Yeah.
My friend Brian Ward has the Roll It Again shirts he sells on his T-Public page. I have one of those. I wear it with pride. Love that moment. So all that was the feeling there. Now, again, you mentioned the Fortnite of all the dead speak and all those things. Like it was tough for a lot of folks. It's still tough for people I know who even kind of like the film. And I'm not here to dispute the notion that it was a bit of a change from what you thought was coming. I think if JJ had control of all three, maybe this would have happened. I think after Snoke is removed from the board, you got to figure out something. I think Kylo could have been the big bad, but I also, what I love is this is the Supreme Chancellor, Kylo, who's become himself, who he thinks he is, Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
That's part of the Last Jedi. Jen Land on ForceCenter always would joke, like, anyone who asks him to take that mask off, he kills. So he takes it off. It's destroyed, whatever. But he becomes Kylo Ren.
Yes.
And then the moment he hears rumors of Palpatine alive and the dead speak, and he seeks him out and he finds him, and there he is, offering him everything. But the first thing Kylo Ren does is run like a little baby and put his helmet back on.
Yep.
To repair it and be able to be like, I must assert my position. And now I'm killing people and I'm upset. I'm a tyrant and I'm afraid. I'm afraid of that girl, Rey. I'm afraid of this guy coming back and taking away my position. But I'm going to work with him. I'm going to all that stuff, whatever.
Yeah,
but
I'll
I think
play
that's
both
part
sides until we get to a place that's fortuitous for me.
all that stuff works for me. But it would be a lie to say that it wasn't a bit of a swerve. I know a lot of the conference. I don't agree that there needed to be a plan, but there was a swerve. There was also a swerve from Trevorrow, Johnson to Trevorrow. Trevorrow, I hear tell, begged Ryan not to kill Luke. Begged him not to do that. It didn't happen, and so then Carrie passes away tragically, and you got to do something. And people I know were making jokes about an emergency, break glass. It's such bad faith critique of it there. The answers, the answers weren't given on screen because why would they? That's boring. Beaumont Ken tells you everything you need to know. Secrets, dark science, or cloning secrets.
Yeah, you don't need a fourth wall
things.
break of exposition.
Yeah. Like, we get it. JJ in the press leading up to it. Oh, you got me going, Anthony. JJ in the press leading up to it said, one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars is the Darth Plagueis the Wise scene.
I loved it.
Well, so there's your answer. uh, Ray Carson's very solid, wonderful
Mhm.
novelization of the film. I highly recommend people read her novelization, Rise of Skywalker. Kind of gives you that Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher gives you a little bit more of the answer. Palpatine died, but he had been planning for this because he always plans for this stuff. He never wants
Yeah.
to lose. He never wants to go. That's the whole thing with Plagueis.
Mhm.
Darth Plagueis was trying to find immortality, and they're trying to do it unnaturally, and that is not the way of things. That's what George Lucas wants us to learn. We're only here for a short time, and you
Yep.
only get the most out of this by giving, not gathering. Palpatine gathers all his options, so he throws himself into Plan B. Plan B takes 30 years, gives him Dathan, all those things. We don't need to know that. We don't need to know that until later. We didn't need to know. And it's like I get a little grumpy, but we
Yeah.
did not need to know in 1977 what the Clone Wars were.
Nope.
We just knew they were this
He
thing
said,
that
"All
had
right,
put
cool."
them together. We'll find out. Tip of the iceberg, right? That's Star Wars.
Mhm.
It's one of Joseph's favorite things, one of the things we love. It does not mean you always get the answers. And it doesn't mean, I guess we could have had Rick Ollier the third in the film to be alongside Beaumont
go,
Ken. Oh, well,
"Look."
somehow Palpatine returned. Well, he's not actually a clone. His essence was thrown into bodies, and his dark scientists in another part of the galaxy that he had been secretly hoarding, they tried to bring him back. And actually, it hasn't worked. He's decrepit, and
Mhm.
that's why he's trying to
He's
take,
barely
literally,
clinging on. Yep.
he literally is trying to take for the generation coming up behind him. He's literally Star Wars is about generational exchange. Obi-Wan Kenobi, this is your fight, Luke. Luke
Yep.
Skywalker to Rey, this is your fight. Qui-Gon, like, I'm out. You got to do this. Didn't plan on it, but you got to do generational exchange and growth is all part of Star Wars. And you got Palpatine constantly standing in the way of that,
Mhm.
literally taking the life and the generations behind him, taking control of this young woman's body and saying that
Mhm.
it's mine.
Yeah.
It's mine. I want you are not going to be you. You strike me down, but I will possess you
Mhm.
and I will control. Palpatine is essentially saying, your body, my choice.
Hey,
It's
it's
there.
there.
It's there. And that's powerful. So if you want to get tripped up on they answered it in Fortnite or the Dead Speak is all we got. I got nothing for you. I really don't anymore. 5 years on for this film, I don't got nothing for you. I don't want you to like it if you don't want to like it. There's so many other Star Wars things.
It's like
But
you're
if you
you're
want to
picking
sit
things you don't wanna like at that point.
if you want to sit down at a bar or a party and talk about it with me, I said this to someone recently, and I'm so Anthony, I'm so grumpy. They wanted to debate Star Wars with me at a party, and I said, talking Star Wars with me is like getting in the ring with Tyson in '89.
Mhm.
It's not going to go well for you,
No,
okay?
it's not.
Because I'll also tell you what's bad. I'll also tell you what doesn't work. But we come to the table of Star Wars because it is, like I said, it is so
Mhm.
heavy it almost crumbles almost. Oh wait, it is this giant cultural thing that is beyond just a movie. And to
Yeah.
talk about it as only a movie, though perfectly fine, I don't need everyone to collect Funko Pops and figures, but to talk about it as only a movie is to undercut its value to us as a piece of art in our
Mhm.
society that's been there for the last 50 years. This is our Mozart. This is our Shakespeare. This is
Yes.
what we have. All right. I just watched that John Williams doc. I think it's a wonderful point they make that
It is.
we don't have Mozart. We don't have Vivaldi. We don't have we have John Williams.
We got J-Dubs.
Yeah. And others. But this is our modern art. And so I love
Mhm.
discussing on that because that's its value. So if you come to the table and be like, I don't know, why did Palpatine come back? Who cares why he came back? The
He
point
did.
is he's back. Evil returns. In fact, evil never left. The
Engage
fight
with it,
never
yeah.
stops. And the moment you stop the fight, the moment you give up, that's when they grow, even when you think you've defeated them. And that's a lot of what episode 7 is about.
Exactly.
And 8, a lot of what Leia faces. Anyways, I love that Palpatine's in the film. And plus, final note for me on it. We get more lines with Ian McDiarmid.
Oh,
We're blessed to have
sign
that.
me up.
We're blessed to have it.
My child, what does he say? I made you. I love that. I've been every voice you've ever heard inside your head.
It's
so good.
so good. And I was surprised that Snoke died, but I loved it. In the end, I love that Snoke went. I think it was so great, and it wasn't even about subverting expectations. It was what the story would
It's
dictate.
what it needed. It needed that. It needed that for Kylo Ren to become who he is.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
then that leads to episode 9, them being a reversal back to retreating back to like in episode 7, Kylo Ren when he's threatened again with his power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Power threat, everyone that has power, as Palpatine tells you, is
Mhm.
afraid to lose it.
Afraid to lose
And
it.
that's why he's
Yeah.
coming back, because he's afraid to lose his power. He had contingency plans on.
Mhm.
Again, we're in the
Yeah,
same boat of trying to defend this stuff here.
yeah,
It's
no, and look, and again, some of your, some of your listeners might be like, I don't agree with that, and that's completely fine. And I don't mean to talk tough here, like I'm going to throw a drink in your face at a bar. I just have faced it for so long, and because of who I am, a lot of people, when I walk into places, it's like, let's do it, let's go.
yeah,
I don't need to convince you of anything.
yeah. You're not changing
Um,
people's minds.
but
Let's be
but
honest. They
if you listen, don't listen to me, listen to Scrimshaw more, listen to Jennifer more. But one of the greatest things of 11 years of doing ForceCenter is when someone comes up and goes, you know what, man, I I didn't like Rise of Skywalker. In fact, I hated it. And then I watched it, and then after I listened to your podcast, I kind of like it now. Like that, it's not about getting a win, that I'm getting
Mhm.
a dub, that I convinced you to like something that you used to think was horrible. I just want you to appreciate what's there. What's the
Yeah,
message of these films? That's all.
yeah. You're gonna a Force Ghost conversations well said on that.
Yeah,
The first
yeah.
that we've ever dished out on this show. You're getting the first
Oh,
Force
good.
Ghost conversations well said. Look,
Yeah.
we're in the same boat here. I love that Palpatine's in this movie.
Mhm.
It to me, as soon as he was announced, I was like, yeah, the Phantom Menace. Of course,
Yeah.
he's been pulling the strings from the beginning.
Mhm.
The guy that has, my wife always says, trust people at their word. He tells
Yeah.
people, like, all
Yeah.
those that are afraid to have power are afraid to lose it. Why would you
Mhm.
think that the most powerful guy in the universe didn't have contingency plans on contingency plans on contingency plans in order to
Mhm.
to figure things out? Now I'm glad that canon, as people are
Mhm.
probably getting mad at, they're like, oh, they're trying to retcon these ideas and all that stuff with like Project Necromancer and talking about it, or trying to over
Yeah.
explain it and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Hey, it's cool that they're trying to explain it, in my opinion. I don't mind it.
Yeah.
uh, but the fact that
Rarely when the term retcon is used with sincerity, rarely is it actually what the case is. Like, it's just more information.
Exactly. And I like more context. It helps.
Mhm.
Shadow of the Sith, Adam Christopher does a great job of adding
Yes.
more to the thing.
Mhm.
Because I will tell you, as much as I love the reveal and bringing him back, and then
Mhm.
showing Dathan in the movie, I had to do a lot of soul searching in my own head
Oh,
as I'm watching this live, where I'm like, did this guy actually have a family? Did he
yeah.
was
Look,
Sheev
we
Palpatine like
uh,
engaging in adult activities? Like,
yeah,
and I was
yeah.
like, okay, maybe he did, because as a politician, he probably wanted to keep the facade that he
Keep the
wasn't the
facade.
Sith
Yeah.
Lord. Maybe he did have a kid or two here and there,
Yeah.
and there's just Palpatine running around the universe. Who knows?
Yep.
And of course, that we learned that that's not the case. He was being failed clones. Dathan is a failed clone,
Yeah.
and maybe to call Rey his grandchild is a bit of a uh, not entirely correct. Perhaps
Yeah, yeah.
he's like an uncle in a way. I don't know how
He's
you.
Let's just say family.
But it's
He's
just easier
family.
to say you're my grandchild.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think to many it doesn't work, but for me at
Mhm.
least, I think it makes sense given the context of like, this is episode 9. It's the story of Skywalkers and Palpatines, and how
Mhm.
can we put Rey in a position where she has to confront the greatest darkness? Make her a result of the greatest
Mhm.
darkness. Like, add her to
Yeah.
this mix, and let's see how that putting her in this position affects her and changes her. Does she
Mm.
reject that? And which we know what happens in this
Mhm.
movie. But it's a great place to put our heroes into, and to face these, and they face the story presented to them, and how do they react to it. That's how you learn how characters grow and develop and
Yeah.
become the characters that they're meant to be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, episode 7 is the story of a girl from nowhere, who climbs the steps into a story she doesn't feel she belongs. Or her
Yeah.
greatest fear is that she has no place in the story, and then what comes along is she learns that her fear is true. You have no place. Everyone tells you you're nothing, and so she has to recover from that hard truth. But she has all the pieces that she needs to move on, and then in that process finds out, oh no, not only were you part of the story, you are, as you say, the dark center of the story.
Yeah.
And then who you are could actually be a problem now. And you must find out who you truly are beyond that, and make the choice. And I think it's all pretty clear. It's all
Yeah.
pretty clear.
The thesis statement is in the story.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
there if you wanna engage with it and, react to it.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
anywho, let's talk about some more controversial things in this movie, perhaps.
Mhm. Sure.
And I would say beyond the Palpatine of it all, I feel like well, let's distill it to about the two that I think are
Sure.
probably the biggest ones here. So let's start with one: the passing of Ben Solo.
Mhm.
Were you shocked by this development within the movie? And do you think there is perhaps a scenario where Ben Solo could have lived?
Yeah, I look, I wasn't shocked. I think this is something that I was down for. I was intrigued by the idea. Here's what I was pretty damn sure was gonna happen, and I'm not going
Hmm.
out on a limb here like a great prognosticator, but I thought he was gonna be redeemed, right?
Yeah.
From I'm talking about the opening frame of episode 7. It was like, yeah, I mean, he's
We're heading on this path. Yeah.
that's Han and Leia's kid, and he's gonna be redeemed. Like, what are we doing here? I did have some wants. Again, this is why I was saying I'm not over here pious and pure on having no desires for the story to go in a direction that I want.
Hmm.
I was intrigued by the idea of redeeming Ben Solo, and then unlike Vader takes a powder after he has his redeeming moment, and his kids later on are forced to deal with his legacy. Maybe Ben Solo, what happens when the next day the war is won and he shows back up at Resistance Base and is like,
Hey
"Hi,
guys,
Freds, how you
it's me.
doing? Yeah, I'm good. I'm on your side now." I love that stuff. I love dealing with it, and Game of Thrones, I think at times does a good job of dealing with that too. Yeah, "Hi, I'm
Hmm.
Jamie Lannister. Yep, I killed a lot of your kin. Hi, change of
Here,
heart.
here to fight.
Here to fight." I think with Ben Solo, I would have loved to have seen that a
Yeah.
scenario in which he could have survived. Yeah, they could have both killed Palpatine and won the day. But you know, again, talking about letting go, a lot about what Kylo and Ben is about is he makes a choice early on. I think is a justifiable his not the choice to kill Han's not justifiable. What am I saying?
Hmm.
Han's my guy, but Han and Leia aren't perfect, and I always give the example of Kylo Ren. Ben Solo is a pastor's kid, and often
Mm,
pastors' kids infamously go a little awry. I don't think it's a bad thing, but their parents are publicly lauded, privately they're
yeah.
humans. And I'm not even saying Han and Leia were bad parents. I'm just saying they were parents, and that Ben cannot reconcile the two identities, and is left behind in a lot of things, and he makes a choice, and that's why that choice to kill his father brings him no peace and haunts him
Yeah.
every one of his days. And so he's afraid to go back, and it is one of those things too where Leia's. This is why Luke in Last Jedi, I have not come here to save him.
Hmm.
I've not come here to save him. And I think what that is said, and Joseph spoke about this beautifully many times on ForceCenter, but I think what that says is you can save him. That's why
Hmm.
Han
Mm.
Han, you have to go save him. Luke can't, and if Luke shows up in episode 7 to go to Starkiller Base, like a lot of people, including me, thought was going to happen in the movie, Ben hates him.
Yeah.
He's Kylo in a lot of ways because of his uncle.
Yeah.
But his father can save him. His mother can save him. And
Hmm.
but Ben at one point is too afraid to go back to the compassion that showed to him. Rey shows him the ultimate compassion, and it costs her life later on. But on the Death Star ruins,
Hmm.
she saves him. She saves him. Her power nearly killed him. Her greatest fear at this time. She saves him. Leia holds on. I think that's beautifully tied to it as well.
Yeah.
She holds on as long as she can, but you know what I mean. Like he's afraid. He's afraid to go back. He's afraid to turn
Hmm.
around. How many times have you done something in your life, gotten angry, gotten mad, walked away? And again, sometimes it's good to walk away from life. Sometimes it's good to
Hey.
make those
Yeah.
decisions. Sometimes we need that in these troubled times. Maybe you don't need to talk to all of your family right now. I don't
Hey.
know.
Hey. Yeah, that's right.
Case by case, you do what is good for you. But in many cases, on a job, I've lost my temper at jobs.
Hmm.
And then you have to turn around. And maybe that person's willing to forgive you, but are you willing to forgive yourself? He wasn't
Yeah.
until Ray came
Yeah.
along. So I think it's powerful. I
Oh.
think it's heart wrenching. The kiss is what it is. Not my favorite thing too. They,
Sure.
and God bless JJ. He doesn't say a lot, but he's like, no, it's a friendly kiss.
Hey.
I've been around friendly kisses, JJ. I don't think that was a friendly kiss. And I got it. People were heartbroken. People were they loved Raylos, loved those two
Hey,
together.
they still do.
They still do, and I get it. And I'm not here to quench, or stomp out that fire for Raylo going on. But I like what's there. Again, what is there? Because again, my expectation going in episode 9 was he is redeemed, but he survives, so we have to deal with it.
Beautifully well said. I think this character offered up so much promise, and people really gravitated to the character in many ways over the 3 films of this. And go ahead.
No, to be Adam, I think Adam Driver's that's those 3 films, particularly 8 and 9, are some of the best acting in Star Wars ever.
You're not wrong there. Not wrong.
So thankful the way he played it. Yeah.
So I will say, I was devastated, I think, the first time seeing this. And then as subsequent viewings have gone on, or at least, let's say the drive where I was reflecting on everything that I had witnessed, I thought, well, if he had survived, there's a good chance he may have been put into a prison for the rest of his life for war crimes against the galaxy. And whenever New Republic that gets put together, there is no war tribunal ever that would allow the man that has completed a lot of war crimes throughout the last couple of years to just live freely outside of a jail cell. Okay, if he would have lived, he probably wouldn't have had much of enjoyment in life aside from a visitor here and there inside of his really, really tight jail cell. But the thing that this movie really presents, especially in the beginning, right? The dark side of the Force is the pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural, right? He's not clinging on to life. He passes naturally. He saves. He's laying down his life for a person he cares for, respects, maybe even loves. And what I love is that, at least in Adam Driver's performance, I don't know how it's in the script, but he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't think, he is not sitting there contemplating, what am I going to do with this choice here? What do I do? He sees her. He just has a moment of calmness and serenity, and then heals her and projects the rest of his life force into her, and they have that touching moment at the end. It doesn't seem like he regrets it or second thought it one bit there, which I think is the most natural thing about that. Life is natural, and he does, and there's a cost to this. I think that's what the point of this is, right? The cost of prolonging your life is that you are whatever feeble monstrosity that you are left with and trying to prolong the existence of your mortal being, versus naturally passing away and becoming one with the Force as a result of that. I would argue, choosing to be selfless, a true Jedi act in that moment, laying down. I mean, it's the greatest act of love, one could argue that he's doing there. And then allowing Rey, who just made this great sacrifice for everybody by defeating the Emperor, killing him by thrusting his own defense, just being defensive. She's not on the attack at all. She's just reflecting what's back there at him. I think it's just poetic. I think it's a poetic way. And as time has gone on, I just am more emboldened by the choice to not that he necessarily had to die, but it's just a natural progression of this man finding peace and purpose again in his last moments there as Ben Solo, and just reflecting on the entire trilogy. I think that's a beautiful way to send him out on. So I think they did a good job, and Adam Driver, like you said, nails it. Absolutely.
Yeah, two of my favorite little moments connecting 8 to 9 is when at the end of the fight, Snoke is dead. They defeat the Praetorians, and Rey says, Ben, we can still stop them. And she turns around and Ben ain't home.
Yeah, he ain't listening.
Ben ain't home. It's Kylo. And then in this moment, she kind of quietly says, Ben. I love that moment. I love the connection. Yeah. I love the journey. So again, him living on, it could have been done. Could have. But this is what's there.
It's what's presented in the film. And there's a lot to take from that, I think, thematically. So the second controversial aspect of
Mhm,
this movie, we talked a little bit, is about Rey and her lineage.
mhm,
Is revealed in this film that Rey is a Palpatine, and then by the
mhm,
end of all things, she adopts the Skywalker surname.
mhm.
How well do you think that the storyline is handled within the film's execution? So yeah, let's just have a
It
chat
was
about Rey
mhm.
Skywalker.
Here's the thing is Last Jedi, like, to be clear, I think Ryan I don't have the exact interviews in front of me, and I really am a big fan of Ryan Johnson. Um, I think he has said he intended the answer of who her parents is just is no one. Like, she came from nowhere. This is part of the story he was telling, and I do
Yeah.
think it was a bit of a switch up. I don't even think I'm not talking about a switch up from Chris and JJ. I think it was just a switch up for the audience. I don't think they could have anticipated. They're just building this myth, and Star Wars is popular and they're doing their thing, but I don't think they could have anticipated. You can never anticipate a real breathing audience
Hmm.
connecting with something like that. People really connected
Yeah. Yeah,
with
they did.
the Ray from nowhere idea, which again was very present. We have said on Force Center, Joseph did a wonderful about 30-minute solo episode of Ray and her journey. It's on our YouTube page if it's easier to find than maybe our podcast page. But in short, he's more eloquent than me. But Last Jedi does talk about heroes from nowhere stepping
Hmm.
up.
Hmm.
Rose Tico is more of an example of a hero from nowhere.
Yeah.
A working class, overlooked. She's in overalls. That's part of her story. Part of what Ryan's done. Ray is from nowhere. Kylo says what he feels he knows, and I'm just talking about in story. I'm not even worried about the movies or the scripts or anything. He says what he thinks he knows. He also says what he knows she fears the most.
Hmm. Hmm.
Episode 7 is the first time they fight, not on Starkiller Base, but in the interrogation scene when they invade each
Mm.
other's minds. He's invading her mind without consent, just roaming around and finding every one of her fears. So she says, "All right, Bucko, I'm going back into your mind. I know your fear." That is one of the most intimate moments in Star Wars,
Hey,
which
you're right.
leads to the finger touch, the closest sex scene we've ever had in Star Wars, in Last Jedi. But even then, it's less romance and more just connection. They know each other, and that makes sense that the dyad becomes an answer for it.
Mhm, mhm.
But I think their connection, that's part of the strength there. And so for a lot of for Ray in that moment, that's the worst thing to tell her. Oh, you feel you're a girl left alone on a planet waiting for her planet. You have no place in the story. Guess what? That's true.
Yeah,
And the only thing that is there for you is me. Take
yeah.
my hand and we'll rule the galaxy together. Let's do it. I'm the only one. Man, rulers do that. Rulers
Mhm,
do that. We
mhm.
hear a lot of things like authoritarianism and fascism thrown around. The core of that is a ruler saying, only I can save you. Only I can save you. All those fears you have, those migrants coming in to put fentanyl in your Cheerios and steal your jobs, only I can save you. That's what he's telling Ray in that moment, even though
Mhm.
there's some truth to the story. So, but the concept of nowhere is there. But Joseph said, going back to what Joe said, I never want to put words in his mouth. Go listen to his stuff. But he said something that I loved about the movie. Still does not democratize the Force. Rey
That's
is
right.
still chosen and called, not the chosen one in terms of the Star Wars story, but she's called to
Mhm.
something bigger. She is important beyond even her understanding.
That's
She is
right.
not a mechanic. The Force is the trailers tell us this in episode
I
7. The
mean,
Force is
Maz says it.
calling to you.
Yeah, she says it.
Let it in. She is special. She is special.
The lightsaber
She
chose you. Like,
she might be nowhere from nowhere, but she is special. And so to go to 9, it is a bit of a changeup. You're expecting the fastball. They come in with a slider low away. Got it. Got it. And it hurt. I know people, and I'm saying this respectfully, it hurt them.
mhm,
They
mhm.
cried not of joy or being moved
Yeah.
by the film. They cried because they felt their own life that they had
Mm,
staked a lot of this on had
mm,
been undercut. And I'm not saying that lightly. These people I love and respect who were like, nope, that hurt me.
mm.
So I don't think Ryan and the team of 8, and I don't think JJ and Chris and the team of 9 could really fully estimate the value that people put on Ray from nowhere because
Yeah.
they're already making the film. I was at
How
the
could
Last
they?
Jedi
Yeah.
premiere. Abrams and Terrio were there. At least Abrams was. Maybe I don't see. Maybe Terrio wasn't, but they were there,
Hmm.
and they had already started to make the movie. So it's kind of like how Ryan said, "Oh, the question of Rey's parents." When I was writing my script, I didn't know Snoke theories and Rey's parents theories were going to be the be all end all of Star Wars
You had
discourse
no
after
idea.
Force Awakens. I didn't know that. The script had been written. We were starting to shoot. Like, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too, if I'm to analyze it outside of the story. Again, the inside of the story, I'll say things if it doesn't work for you, if it hurt you, if the story of Rey hurts you, you're right in that. As JJ says, if people don't like the film, they're right. If you don't like what they did with Rey, you're right for you. I can only connect with it. Now, Rey's a character I look up to. Rey's a character I
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
adore and root for and really want to be. Um, she again, I think the worst fear is all right. She comes over, as I said earlier, she overcomes the fear of I don't have a place in the story.
Yeah.
And then I don't have a family. I don't have anywhere to belong. I don't have anyone. I'm nowhere. I'm from nowhere. I'm no one. It's one of her first lines in the trailer too. Who are you? I'm no one. And she doesn't say it like Arya Stark about to murder everybody. She says like, I am no one. And then comes along. The first thing we hear is she can't connect with the Jedi. The voices, she can't hear them. She has this
Hmm.
vision.
Hmm.
She's connected to Kylo. She has this vision of her on the throne. And Leia's saying, never be afraid of who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Well, she is then told in another scene that people hated, that's Rise of Skywalker, that not everyone, but people reacted to. You got Kylo then saying, oh, yeah, I got some additional information. You thought you were from nowhere? Nah, it gets better. You are the granddaughter of evil.
Hmm.
I was the offspring of bad parents, and I had to kill one, and I can't help who I am, and you can't help who you are, Rey. You're the granddaughter of evil.
Yeah.
So give into it.
We're
Don't
in this
fight it.
together.
Yeah, be who you are. Don't be afraid of who you are. Be. But what Leia's saying, of course, is about who you are, not what the
Hmm.
trappings are,
Hmm.
not the name.
Yeah.
The Skywalker name, it becomes a chosen name, a given name, a selected name, whatever you want to say. But who you are is a person who uses your position and your power to help others. The snake with the nexus that she heals,
Hmm.
that is a movement, by the way, that changes the galaxy.
It
Because
is.
instead of striking down this snake, which she could have, which Poe and Finn would have helped her, she gives away her life force. She heals it, compassion. Who sees that? BB-8. What does BB-8 do? He gives some of his energy to Dio.
Hmm.
Dio then has the map to Exegol. They don't get there unless
Yeah.
that little droid shares that story.
Yeah.
So Rey's a giver. She's helping. She checks on BB-8's thing. That's who you are. That's who you are. Not your power, your name, your everything. That's who you are. And so that's where the journey goes for me with Rey. And again, I'm respectful of people who were again. I know people who were legitimately like hurt. They felt
Yeah.
some choices they made in their life were no longer validated. And I'm saying this very respectfully because that's how much these things matter.
Hmm. Hmm.
I was lucky to have my face reflected in my media my entire life, so I get it.
Right.
Meaning I get it. I understand that perspective because I don't get it because I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I've had
Yeah.
lifetimes of heroes and idols that people felt they had
And
one with
infinite more
Rey.
in the future too.
Yeah, and more coming. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on the Rey thing.
Yeah.
But again, part of the narrative in it. I'm sorry, I've hogged the spotlight here on your show here, but part of the narrative does become the behind the scenes thing
Yeah.
where you go into that film, they do that where you're like, well, Rey was from nowhere, and now JJ and Chris Terrio changed it,
Hmm. Hmm.
and how dare they? And then it becomes about the news, it becomes about the behind the scenes stuff, and you're not engaging with what's there.
Yeah.
But again, people tell me all the time, like we can go to Finn briefly, like, well, Finn should have led a stormtrooper uprising. He should have. I go, wow, yeah. Oh my God, that's great. Could you imagine that? If he had led 2,000 stormtroopers in revolt against the Emperor, that's great. Anyways, they didn't do that. This is what they did. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
So we can do that all day with Rey as well.
You could.
But what is there is pretty powerful to me.
I agree. I frankly am a big fan that she chooses to take the Skywalker surname because it's the
Yeah.
greatest victory in the end, right?
Yeah.
Palpatine is left alone. No one like
Mhm.
the light side of the Force, right? The good side of like, good people working together.
Mhm.
Like there's
Mhm.
communal. It's a we. It's not an I.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas like the Sith, right? He's alone. He's left
He's alone.
alone.
Yeah.
He's clinging on to life. It is the complete diametrically opposed nature of it all, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
he is he's at the point where he is so evil and decrepit and frankly disgusting and horrific
Yeah.
that his own kind of flesh and blood, quote unquote, is like, no, I don't, I'm not you. I'm not you in word, form, or deed.
Mhm. Mhm.
I can't deny the fact that we may be related, but
Yeah.
I am not
Yeah.
you.
I'm
I,
not
and
you.
and that's a great lesson to just the
Yeah.
Star Wars overall of it all, of
Yeah.
found family, right?
Yeah. Totally.
And yeah, I love people bemoan it all the time. Han Solo finds his family. It's right there.
It's it's a pretty great moment,
It's
actually.
a great moment. Let's be honest. It's wonderful. You can make fun of it all you want, but the
We'll
thematical element of it
yeah.
is beautifully said.
We'll come back and we'll talk Solo one time too, but, I love the moment he gets his name, so,
I agree. I agree.
yeah.
We're on the same boat there on that one. And
Mhm.
just Rey Skywalker, like the Rise of Skywalker. It's right there. She rises up,
Mhm.
and all the Jedi living. I'm with all the Jedi. I am not alone. Even though Palpatine's like, I'm all the Sith. Yeah, I. It's not.
Yeah,
It's an I. It's not a
and
we.
that's part of the tear-inducing moment for him too. She hears the voices. It's cool to hear all the voices, but
Hmm.
never have you been alone.
Never.
And this is someone who spent her entire life alone, and that was never the case. It just seemed that way, and we all get that. We all feel that. We all connect with
Agreed.
that. And it doesn't mean you have to have a powerful name and a rich family and a Ray from nowhere. And in some ways, I think, and this, I don't want this ever to sound like a insulting justification to people hurt by her story. Um, but in some ways, to me, she chooses to be Ray from nowhere. Yes, she chooses
Hmm.
to be a Skywalker, but
Yeah.
she's like, oh, I could have been granddaughter Palpatine, sat on the throne and ruled it all. Um, but I'd rather be from nowhere.
Yeah. I'd rather be from nowhere. It's
Hmm.
the ultimate rejection of the greatest evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the ultimate victory for the Skywalkers, like
Hmm.
Luke,
Yep.
Anakin. This is tying it to all three trilogies. Is at the end of
Yep.
the day, your own family is like, no, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
uh,
And yeah, and one
a
of
powerful moment,
the
even these times.
yeah, and one of the worst takes is a lot of those fan edits that had 15 Force ghosts show up to help Ray in the final fight. That is antithetical to what the Star Wars is about. This is her fight. Luke says that. 1,000 generations live in you, but this is your fight now. That
That's
is the
right.
story of Star Wars. It is her moment. And I don't even want to get into the weeds of the social or political aspect of you don't need these Force ghosts to take away the moment from Ray. That's there. That's part of my argument. Put it on a shelf. Not even worry about that.
Sure.
In story, this is her fight. And she chooses to not give in to hate, like you said, much like
Yeah,
Luke threw
it's
down his
beautiful.
blade.
And
Yeah.
and as on Force Ghost conversations, we analyze Force Ghosts pretty hard on this show.
Yep. Yep.
And the Force Ghosts historically have always been there to just nudge the hero in a direction, not to actually
For,
do the action.
Force ghosts, yes, correct. And Force ghosts show up when people need help. Whenever
We
they
sit
need
on a
help.
log and we tell them a story,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then we
Or
go
they show
away.
up, yeah, they show up in an Ewok party, and that's,
Yeah,
maybe you need help to party.
we
But
look, and we
but
wave,
Luke
and
but Luke in that moment, they show the Force ghosts, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin show up on Endor because Luke needs him in that moment to
yeah,
know that you've done it. You've
he
did it.
needs to know that we're all good.
Yeah.
Everything's good right now. There's more battles to be fought, but right now
Yeah.
we did a good. We did
Yeah.
good. Let's
We did
celebrate this victory.
we did a good.
We did it good, and we'll fight the Battle of Jakku in a few years.
Exactly.
We'll really finish
Exactly.
this thing.
Yeah.
So shifting gears, I just want to take some time to just celebrate anything and everything that we like within this movie. I think there's so much. We're probably just scratching the surface on so many things here. What are a few of your favorite scenes or moments or even characters that you see within Episode 9 that you're like, that
Mhm,
brings me
mhm.
joy, that brings me comfort, that's cozy. I like when
Yeah.
this scene comes up.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars, of all time, if I was to do an updated version of Why We Love Star Wars, it would be the Han and Ben scene.
Yeah, it's so
I think
good.
it's one of the best acted moments. I think it's one of the best written moments. It's not syrupy sweet, but it has, it's the greatest I know in the history of
Yeah,
Star
it
Wars.
is.
In that,
Oh, and the
even
way he
I
says
think
dad. Oh.
that, and I think, and I'll say this, maybe seculars, like, of course, the first I know is legendary and it will never be replaced. But what I'm saying is to come back and it's his son who
Mhm.
can't even say the words, I love you, Dad. And that's all he wanted to say back then on Starkiller
Mhm.
Base. And for him just to say, I know, like, and it moves me even now talking about it. So I love that scene. I love the Pisana stuff. I love when they first get to Pisana. I love the chase and this lightning seeking sand and all that stuff. Very serial adventure pulp. But I've always loved when they get there and there's this brief moment of joy
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
Rey's face. And she has the kid asking her who her name is, which serves as foreshadowing to the end for sure. But I thought this was a great reminder. This is a kid that grew up alone. I love the Force Awakens moment. If I never, saw so much green in my life, like I love
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
I love Rey putting her hand out in the rain on Ahch-To in Last
Mhm.
Jedi, and I love this moment where she's kind of smiling. This is someone who doesn't. We haven't seen her smile a lot
Yeah.
since leaving her home on Jakku for this start of this journey. Um, and there's a reminder of who and what she's fighting for, right? Joy, the concept of joy, the concept of community and family and people around you. Like I think it's a sweet little moment. I love to
Mhm.
love Lando. I love the Lando post scene. We had each other. Great scene that Oscar Isaac now I think famously said that he asked for that scene. He wanted that moment with Poe and Lando, and I think Lando's perfect for it. I think Billy D really nails it in that
Yeah.
moment. So like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. For me, I've been a big fan of Zori Bliss ever since the movie came
Oh,
out.
same. Love Zori.
Zori and of course Babu
Mm,
Fricka comes along with it. Like
yeah.
so cool, so pulpy, so fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Babu's
Wild,
great.
wacky. I love Bolio. Win the war. Like,
He's
come
the
on.
best.
That's a
Mark
way to
Hamill.
start off a movie. Let's
Yeah.
rock and roll.
It's so
Um,
funny too because when that happened, Joseph's sitting behind me and he like tasked me. He goes, "I knew." He goes, "The second that character and that line showed up, I knew it was going to be one of your favorite lines ever." I was like, "It absolutely was."
Yep, it's right there. It's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I love the John Williams cameo. It gets me every time.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yep.
finally, we got this man in this thing.
Yep.
I love also in that same sequence. I love the Dengar, whatever
Rothgar Den. Yeah. Yeah.
Rothgar
Yeah.
dead.
Yep. Yep.
Like
Yep.
that was
Yep.
the gift that
Yep.
keeps on giving when
Yep.
you you get like the encyclopedias afterwards and they're like, yeah,
Yep.
that's actually kind of Dengar. Like, oh,
Yep.
maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Yep.
I don't know. Love that. I love the sequence that you have shared already about the Ben and Han Solo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, Harrison Ford is just not getting out of his ranch in Wyoming for nothing these
No. No.
days. And he's like, even to come
Callista,
back as Han
I gotta
Solo,
leave. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's always like, it needs to have significance and
Mm-hmm.
purpose in order to come
Yeah.
back. He did a
Yeah.
great job for what the purpose that he had in Episode 7, but in this film, I think he really just concluded that storyline of like reaching out to
Yeah.
his son, like you said, which I think is just so beautiful. And how many of us would love the opportunity to say, or at least have the chance to say something to those that came before us.
Yeah.
And the fact that Ben gets to do that and it heals him in a way that he wish he could have done before, and it gives him the strength to throw away the lightsaber. Uh, Being
Yeah.
almost like his uncle in a way, throwing down his lightsaber and choosing to be good. It's a great theme across all of Star Wars that we can
Yeah.
choose to be what we want to be. We can choose to be a Skywalker. We can
Mm-hmm.
choose to reject the Palpatine within all of us.
Yeah. Reject
It just
hate.
that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Seeing Wedge, that brings joy to me every
Yeah. I
time.
love that. I love that.
Dennis Lawson, hey,
What
rocking
I
and
love
rolling.
too is, you know, a lot of people upon first viewing. I was at some screenings, not screenings. I was at theaters and everything, including one in Arizona that Christmas. And like when Wedge pops up, like 10% of people know it's Wedge. It just
But it means everything to
means
those that
everything
know.
does. Yeah.
And then like the Star
Uh,
Wars theme is included in like that
Yeah. I
cue
thought that was
too.
great too.
So just great
Mhm.
job, John Williams, across the board. And
Yeah.
I love the whole like returning back to Tatooine sequence at the end of this movie. I think that
Yep.
brings me a lot of joy. Seeing Ray just playing around in it, like taking a moment to still be like a young person and
Hmm.
sled
Hmm.
down the sand.
Yeah.
Uh, and to
Yeah.
see these elements like, oh, that's where Luke had blue milk, and that's where Anakin was like, I have to go find my mother. at this
Yeah.
table. There's a lot
It
of
just
story there.
it is, yeah, I really love the moment. Joseph and I have spoken often about how we actually like, the old lady at the end, and it's, it's big, it's a big kind of cheesy end to the I get it. I get that people, groaned, I think, upon first seeing it, and even some of the screenings I had, or laughed or scoffed, fine. I just think it means so much, and
Mhm,
it's not
mhm.
just that no one's been here at this farm, but it just this is the return of a hero,
Yeah.
and it's pretty powerful in that Star Wars way. So I like it. But I that moment, that was one of the frustrations with discourse around that time is I just think a lot of people that stood with me on the Last Jedi battle lines defending that film against bad faith actors. Again, if you don't like the film, one thing. There's a lot of bad faith takes and a lot of
Oh,
bad
yeah.
faith people out there. A lot of the people on the front lines of that war with me were suddenly fighting against me in the Rise of Skywalker war, and it kind of effed my brain up a little bit. And one of it was that moment. There was a lot of like, how could they trap her there? Like Rey had moved there with BB-8 and was going to be there forever. The one thing
Oh.
she felt trapped on Jakku, and you send her back to be trapped on this planet like that's not
Well,
in the film.
that's an
And
interesting
also
take.
it was all over the place, that kind of stuff, and people insulted and offended by it was frustrating for me to take. And if
Huh.
you're writing this film, the end of the Skywalker saga, I'm sure at some point someone said, like, "Hey, what if we were to send her back to Tatooine, to the Lars homestead? Wouldn't that
Makes
be just
sense
kind
to
of
me.
fun?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it just kind of be meaningful and fun? Star Wars film for Star Wars fans." I like that they did it. It
So
was great.
if you pitch that idea to me as as a
Mhm.
person that would be working on this movie, I'd say, why not?
Why not?
That's a great idea.
Why
We've
not?
already been to Mustafar. Let's connect
Yeah,
this even further. We've got the
yeah,
blockade runner. Let's keep
right.
finding ways to connect this film to other films in this. If we're concluding the saga here in
Let's
this
do it.
one, let's do
Let's
it.
do it. Let's have some fun.
So we've talked a lot about various themes throughout this movie. Are there any other themes of this time that you want to highlight that
Uh,
stand out to you as you watch this movie?
yeah, the final one. There's some great stuff with Poe about leadership, continuing some of the lessons he learned. And I'll say this,
I love
Poe.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Poe Dameron and I love Oscar Isaac, and there could have been more with him in all the films. But remember, this is a character that was going to
He was almost gonna
die.
be died. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I think I get when some people say it's a similar repeat beat, but then he's just continuing his lessons and everything.
Hmm.
So that's there. But I'll concede some Poe stuff if people want that, if that makes you happy. But I think Oscar Isaac was great. Um, and a lot of what's going on with him is he's connected greatly to the theme of what you were is not necessarily who you are or who
Yeah.
you're going to
Exactly.
be.
Beautiful.
And a lot of people threw around the word retcon with because we had previously heard and knew from the comics that he was part of the New Republic military, then joined the Resistance, and then suddenly, all right, he's a spice runner. There was additional information. Alex
Hmm.
Segura's
Hmm.
book is pretty good about it.
It's
Pretty
darn
good
good.
book.
I'll tell you. Yeah.
Final thing to talk about, so I don't tuck your up, is Finn. There's a lot of things they could have done with Finn,
Hmm.
including just saying, "I'm connected to the Force and I want to be a Jedi." I agree with that. I agree with that. The Stormtrooper uprising idea, I agree with that too. But I think what is present there in his story, in all three films, is the idea of connection and the value of connection. One of the
Mm.
greatest things in Star
Mm.
Wars. It begins with
Yeah.
Phantom Menace. If you watch in order, symbiotic circles. What happens to the other happens to you, and vice versa. But this is someone who was taken at a young age against his will, forced to fight. Um, and is afraid. And I think there was a
Mm.
misunderstanding of what happened to him in Force Awakens. He didn't find suddenly a change of heart, and I'm going to join the good side. He's afraid and he runs
Yeah. He
away.
found an opportunity.
He found an opportunity. Poe says that. Oh, you need a pilot. I need a pilot. That's the start of their journey. It's but he's not connected to anyone. That's how the first order functions.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
are a number. You're not connected. He is afraid. His blaster is going to be checked. That's Phasma says that. Send your blaster in for inspection. They're going to find out if it was jammed, or they're going to find out that you didn't fire. He's got to get the hell
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah.
And he connects with Rey, but even when he connects with Rey, and it's you know It could have been romantic. I'm glad it wasn't romantic, but he's probably connected in a lot of ways, but he's never had that kind of connection before.
Mhm.
And that is why he goes to Star Killer Base. That is why he
Yeah.
essentially lies. Yeah, I cleaned there. That's not a lie. Yeah, we can blow it up. And Han's like, I like this kid. And then they get there. What does he do? I don't know.
I don't
Use
know.
the Force. I don't care about the cause. Finn doesn't care about it. He cares about Rey. He's connected to Rey. And
Mhm.
Han is the one that's got to say it's bigger than that. And then we pick up with
Yep.
him in Last Jedi, and he believes it's all the same. I'm connected for Rey. Everyone makes fun. I know Finn says Rey a lot. Even Boyega will say that. Yeah, I got it.
A lot of
I
yelling.
agree. I agree. Says Rey a lot. But he's connected to her, and he's got to learn that the connection is beyond that. That the
Mhm.
fight is bigger. That's
Mhm.
that's the whole don't join thing. The
Yeah.
great, wonderful. You've heard me talk. I love the moment with Benicio del Toro saying, "Maybe I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
What
I
does it
got my
matter to
money.
me?" And until that moment, that is Finn's thinking. That's what he's going through. I'm only in it for Rey. A couple other people I'm starting to like. Rose is all right. But your actions, and by not choosing a side, you're killing people I know. So by the time
Mm.
you pick up with them in Rise of Skywalker, it is about connection. And often he is shot to be in the middle of all of it,
Yeah.
literally standing in the middle, connecting Ray and Poe, connecting this and that. And all of this is guided by a feeling
Mhm.
he can't understand. It's something inside that has moved him forward. And now we could say, yeah, he's probably force sensitive. He's connecting to it in a way that's not unlike what we see with Sabine. He might not be an A plus number one draft pick Jedi, but he's connected. He feels it. He's
Yeah,
connected
he's
with the
sensing
force in
it.
a way.
Yeah.
And the force is all around all of us. It binds us together, guides us. And the force is that feeling. And I
Mhm.
think that drives him
Mhm.
forward. And his thing is about connection. And we all need connection
Interesting.
if we're
Yeah.
going to survive.
I mean, I like that a lot. I love everything that you're saying here. I wanna, inquire, now we're on the fin of it all,
Mm-hmm.
about something that I had in this watch is especially, like, the concept of, like, fear and facing fear. I think
Mm-hmm.
our main characters each face a fear of some sort. Rey
Sure.
facing the fear of who she is,
Mm-hmm.
and facing that directly, literally head on.
Mm-hmm.
Poe being afraid of the moment and having to step into this role that he's afraid, like, how do I become a general without you, Leia? Like literally without her, she dies, and then he finds out, and he's like, all right, I guess I'm the general now. I have to
Mm-hmm.
lead these
Mm-hmm.
people into the biggest battle ever. And am I ever ready? Were any of us ready? I don't know.
No. Yeah.
And I feel like Finn is is a little bit afraid of being truthful. Like he's always trying to like tell Ray that he's kind of feeling
Mm-hmm.
something,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of fails in that. At least what the movie presents. He doesn't say it, but he hints at
Mm-hmm.
it a few times. He definitely hints at it. I caught it in this
Yeah.
watch more than ever.
Totally.
And then he tries a few times to tell Ray, but then he's like, "I'll tell you later."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's just him understanding like it's not important right now. I'll tell you later when we can have a conversation about it, rather than like in the midst of like almost dying here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, but I think in a way I've rationalized this thought here as it being like it's also okay to fail sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
we don't have to be perfect. We don't have
Yeah.
we like you don't have to conquer every fear every time you have one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He acknowledges it. He recognizes the weight of the moment, which I think a great leader does,
Mm-hmm.
and then says, "All right, I'm gonna." It's not like it doesn't exist. I'm gonna tell you at a later time.
Mm.
Uh, but I
Yeah.
guess that fear of being truthful, honest, is that something maybe that you
Yeah.
pick up as well when you see Finn in this movie?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a good way to say it. It's a pretty powerful thing, and it's hard to explain. I think he feels this again. It comes down to this feeling, and he
Yeah,
does. There's hints. One of the biggest hints is when he and Poe are yelling at each other, and I think on Pisana, and he's like, "No, I understand. Like Leia and I
yeah,
understand. This is Finn saying it.
yeah.
He's like, I get it.
I
Like,
get it.
right?
Yeah.
Like he gets it. Yeah, I think it's a big fear, and I think
Hmm.
part of this connection, this feeling he keeps talking about, which is
Hmm.
why, yeah, totally understand if they had done the thing where I am a former stormtrooper and then I chose the good side, and then thousands of stormtroopers say we want to do it too.
Yeah.
Could have worked really well, but they didn't. And what they did with Janet going, yeah, all of us left, and we don't understand why. In fact, we're kind of afraid about it, afraid to find out. But it
Hmm.
was just this feeling we had, and Finn's like, yeah, that's what I had too. It's a feeling. The Force is a feeling.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
he doesn't
Yeah.
fully understand it. And could it be afraid of it? Could it be afraid of a path that he might take? Not in terms of I'll go the dark side, but yeah, I'm FN 2187, man. I still don't know who I am. I've been learning. I've been fighting a war since I left.
Clearly.
Now I got to find out who I really am. And if we get to continue with some Finn storytelling, I'd love to explore that more and want him to be unapologetically a Jedi
I
front and
agree.
center.
I agree. Well, if those Lego specials are any indication,
He'll get there.
yeah, we'll get there
Yeah.
hopefully someday with these
Yeah. Yeah.
theoretically upcoming movies. Who knows?
Who knows?
All
Could be.
right, Ken, I got one last question for you here. We've done a
Yes, sir.
lot of job. We've done a great job, I think, looking back on this time, reflecting, analyzing the before, during, and after of the Rise of Skywalker. But I want to take an eye towards the future here. Seemingly, Lucasfilm is trying to get back into the live action movie realm.
Mm-hmm,
Let's just
mm-hmm,
say, hopefully, with the Mandalorian and Grogu potentially be the next one. It looks like. What
mm-hmm.
lessons do you think that Lucasfilm will have learned or look to implement from this era, from the Rise of Skywalker era, perhaps even the larger sequel trilogy, that you think they'll try to implement with their next theatrical release and beyond?
I think being more sure and certain, even then it's
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
to
Hey,
be. I mean, look, I think they at one point were pretty sure that Trevorrow was the guy, and pretty sure that Lord Miller and Josh Trank were the guys, and Patty Jenkins,
things change.
the lady. Things change, and it's right to question them a little bit, and right to have some doubt. It seems as though it's chaotic. I would argue, based on getting a fuller vision of the story, that believe it or not, I know they're gods to many people, but Lord Miller's departure was probably maybe a good thing, but that's a different, not whether you
Yeah.
like Solo or not, but it was, you can read between some lines in some of the actors'
Oh yeah,
interviews if you dig
yeah.
out there. Trevorrow, I'm not even worried about that movie that he made that no one liked. And
Book of Henry.
yeah, Book of Henry. I like what's the first one he did with Mark Duplass?
Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head.
I really like that film, the indie kind of comedy drama he made. Um, I think they made a right decision there too, based on
Hmm.
things that you seem to hear. Again, we're never in meetings. We don't work there. We don't know.
Yeah, and he went
But
on
as
to
far as
Jurassic World. He's not worried about losing
yeah,
this.
going forward, like I think being certain, I think they were pretty confident to announce Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, James Mangold, and Dave Filoni, and I think those films will happen. I know a lot of people doubt
Yeah,
that, and there's people betting against them. I want them to happen. The Mangold film's so far off, and he's so busy that who knows.
yeah.
I think that was part of the reason with Taika. But so those are some of the lessons. Not to run down the list of all the directors.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think there is with recent news that's still unconfirmed, but I think reported by Legacy Trades enough to
At least have
believe that
some merit. Yeah.
the Simon Kinberg produced trilogy, and I think he has a good track record in Star Wars, and it's hard. People fall in the trap of looking at the last IMDb project and thinking that wow, Dark
That's
Phoenix
it.
didn't work.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons it could not have worked. And I don't have a dog in the Dark Phoenix fight or DC or Marvel fight. I quite frankly don't really care. But his Star Wars track record is good. But I think the lessons you
Hmm.
might be searching for will be in that. I really believe, and I know there's been additional reporting, and again, believe it when I see it, but I don't look at that as a film, even though Rey might be in the film, the
Hmm.
character of Rey, who knows if it's Daisy, but I hope it's Daisy. That she could be the quote Obi-Wan and Kenobi the series, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. I think those three Kinberg-led films, if they come to pass, are going to be Star Wars for a next generation.
Right.
It is, the Rey, we got Mandalorian Grogu 2026. We got Rey maybe 2027, maybe Filoni's movie 2029. We'll have a new president by then.
Yeah, we're looking the 30s, 2030s.
These are the 2030s. That means people who are not even born yet, those films will be their first Star Wars films. And I think to have one person shepherd it, and if I'm not talking about the plan that everyone wanted, but I do think you're dealing with a little bit of a stink on it. Seemed chaotic. It was chaotic.
Yeah.
And 7, 8, and 9 definitely feel as though they're directed by two different men. So, and Kinberg might have directors under them. I don't know. We don't know that yet. But I think have one person going, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people mentioned the Rian Johnson trilogy, which was announced and was made official by Lucasfilm. I'm here to tell you that was a consolation prize. That wasn't that still might happen one. I think
would love to see it, but
love to see it. I just don't. I don't even think Ryan really wants to return to Star Wars at this point. So
It's called
I
the
think
Knives
that's
Out trilogy is really what
yeah, and I hope he keeps making those, and I love his, TV show with, what's Poker Face with
Yeah,
Natasha
Poker
Lyonne.
Face.
So anyways, that's to me, you wanna talk about lessons, I think it is having, all right, we're going to get a chance to do this again for a new generation.
Mhm.
And to be clear, the next few years, that's gonna be the first Star Wars for a lot of people too.
That's right,
It's
yeah.
always someone's first Star Wars, but I think you're looking ahead of like, all right, in 15 years, we might be dealing with this Kinberg franchise,
Yeah.
and that's for a new generation.
And that would make sense
And one
age-wise for
person's get it
the
done.
characters and actors
Mhm.
involved to, like, pass it on to
Yeah,
someone else, right? It'll
yeah,
be at least, a 6-year endeavor
yeah,
for
at
or
least.
4
I
years,
mean,
right?
yeah, yeah,
At least for films being released.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's always Star Wars is about generations, passing it on to
yeah.
the next one. Evil will reincarnate in some
It'll be
way,
there. Yep,
whether it's Palpatine returns again or someone returns again, whoever,
yep.
or someone is created. Evil can be created too,
Even
guys.
evil can be created. Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I think those are great lessons to take away from this, and I hope that while we still have these great characters in ages where they're somewhat similar or close to the ages of their current characters,
Right, right. Same.
um, that we can get more stories with them. I would love to see I really, really hope that the Ray New Jedi Order film comes to
Mhm,
pass. I
mhm.
really am excited to see where that story goes, and I think the director has a wonderful track record. And I can't wait to see what she wants
Yeah,
to say in the Star Wars sandbox. Right? I
yeah.
know her documentaries are
It's
well
great.
known across the industry for
Yeah.
their in-depthness and getting at the humanity of these horrible situations.
Mhm.
um Bring that to Star Wars. Let's see what you can tell us about ourselves as
Absolutely.
humans, and use this space opera as allegory for something. Let's do it.
Yep.
I'm
I
all for that.
totally looking
um
forward to that film.
and I think they took a lot of swings in terms of like storytelling, and also developing technology is at the core of Star Wars,
Yeah.
and the way that they kind of started using a little bit of the face technology, deep fake, if you will, whatever
Mhm.
whatever it is that they're doing. They kind of started doing that a little bit with the this era, right? Especially with Rogue One,
Yeah, yeah.
and with the Tarkin and Leia. But the scene with Luke and Leia, where they're training in Episode
Mhm.
9, is a great example of
Yeah.
a quick take a face and put it on someone else.
Yep.
Looks really good. So,
I agree.
I hope Star Wars, the lesson learned is keep pushing the envelope. Seems like ILM's never going to stop, but if they ever did, I hope
Yeah,
that
right.
someone sits them in a room and says, "Don't do that."
I just yeah, 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 they'll always have work. I hope, but it's like even with the Weta Workshop out in New Zealand, you know, had some problems where there's just not as much work, so some of the staff is reduced. So hopefully we get some productions going.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Let's get Star Wars up and running. The theaters could use a Star War, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I can't wait for Mandalorian
Can't
Grogu.
wait for more. That's right. Ken, thank you so much for coming on the show to celebrate 5 years of Rise of Skywalker. Where's the time gone? I
It's
frankly
crazy.
don't know. It's once COVID happened,
Crazy.
like it's
Yeah,
all been a blur.
it's all gone.
Somehow
Yeah.
history is repeating itself again. So hopefully we get a Star Wars film to go along with that history repeating. So uh, thank you so much again for your time, and for the folks that are, for some reason, if there's some overlap that doesn't exist between our audience and Force Center, where can the folks find you online, your podcast feed, anything
Yeah.
you want to plug at this time? Feel free to do so.
Quick links can be found at my website, kennapzok.com, NAPZOK. And look for Force Center. We're on YouTube, podcasts as well. The podcast feed always has one bonus episode every week. We're replaying our Databank Brawl series from about 5 years ago or so. So
Hey, that's awesome.
that's where to find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken. And to the listeners, thank you for listening. I hope that you are able to celebrate the Rise of Skywalker in your own way. And if you want to continue the conversation with us, we're, of course, available on X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Also, we're now on Threads and Blue Sky. So just search for Force Ghost Conversations and we'll be there. We'd love to continue chatting with you all about this wacky space opera, as well as some real world stuff over there too. So I hope that you join us over there. And we'll be back, of course, next week with a brand new episode about something in the Star Wars Lucasfilm adjacent galaxy. And until then, may the Force be with you. Take care.